fight. We don't have to kill. Everybody in the whole wide world really just needs to chill. No, we don't have to fuss, no, we don't have to fight.
Hello, welcome back to Just Chill with Oliver George, episode 21, and it has been a while. It feels good to be back in the saddle. I should say first that if you're listening to this, or watching this rather on YouTube, and you want to take us on your jog or some sort of other situation where you'd prefer audio only, we're on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Podbean as well. And vice versa, if you're hearing this, wherever you may be, come check out the visual version on YouTube. If you want to contact the show, it's justchillpodcasting@gmail.com. Hit me up with any cool guest ideas or constructive criticism, whatever you may be. Just please reach out if you want to. Now, the guest today, very, very special. But before I get to that, I should explain a bit why we've been on hiatus. Some of it's obvious with the pandemic situation that's swept over the world. Everyone's lives were turned pretty upside down. But beyond that, we've got kind of a unique situation here because my significant other is an ICU nurse working on the front lines. We had 3 kids and the older 2 out of school. So there was too many other things really to focus on. Beyond that, also just doing the actual sit-down face-to-face podcast the way I like to do it. Nobody was really going to want to come over for that, especially with Kelly working at the hospital. So, it just seemed like a good time to take a step back and wait it out for a bit, But we saw a unique opportunity to do this episode here today because Kelly goes back to work tomorrow but has been on vacation for a few weeks. So my dad, who's actually the guest today, felt safe coming here since we know she's not carrying any horrible COVID-ness. So my dad, I should say, if you've never seen the show before, it's a bit of a special guest, obviously because he's my dad, but he's also the behind-the-scenes man here at Just Chill, doing the technical stuff, making sure everybody's on camera, sounding good. Also, this show wouldn't exist without him for just helping out with funding and morale even, So I think it was about time to get him on here and learn about the man himself. So without further ado, I'll say it like a French person, my dad, Brian Reilly.
Hello, everyone. Very pleased to be here.
Yeah, you've been here, but it must feel weird sitting there.
Feels very weird sitting here. Yes, I agree with that.
Well, and Brian Reilly, I should say, if you haven't heard me mention it on other episodes, that could be a little confusing. My last name is not George. That's actually my middle name. Reilly is my last name, and my dad's middle name is Oliver, so it's kind of full circle confusing there. But, it's just something that I actually planned for a while. I wanted to originally surprise you with a Father's Day interview where you thought we would be interviewing somebody else, and then last minute just kind of be like,
Ambush.
Yeah, well, I guess you could call it an ambush.
Interview.
But, I kind of had to tell you in this case because I'm sure you would have been wondering, who the hell's the guest?
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, things are starting to loosen up now, but I don't think anyone would be ready to come over at this point. So
you got to get that plexiglass.
Yeah, that's actually something that I'm looking into now. We're a nice distance away, at least.
Yeah, almost 2 meters. Yeah.
I'm starting to think it's getting to that point in society where I could start asking people again, and there would be some people, as long as they're not, immunocompromised or any of that.
And we are in our extended family bubble here, so
yeah,
we're all family right now. So,
I mean, like the fact that no one's been working at the hospital for the last couple of weeks definitely takes the edge off. Yeah, well, and we even had a little COVID sort of scare there, I guess about a week ago.
That's right, yeah.
Kelly was on vacation, but we both kind of had what we thought were symptoms that could be COVID. We both felt kind of lethargic, and it was mainly like feeling like a shortness of breath, too, that really got us scared. But I have massive anxiety, so it became like chicken and the egg kind of situation because everybody knows when you're starting to have a panic attack kind of moment, the breathing is one of the first things that gets...
Well, I think everyone can feel a little panicky when it comes to COVID, the great unknown, right? I mean, you might get the sniffles or you might be on a ventilator close to death. You just don't know what way the dice are going to roll. And while the risk factor goes up as you get older, hey, you could be in your 20s or your 30s and be one of the unlucky ones. So there's that kind of roulette wheel thing going for everybody.
Yeah, there was a lot of uncertainty just floating around, and still is, because a lot of mutation in the virus, it sounded like.
Yeah, but it's minor mutations. All the mutations that they've tracked, I mean, none of them have led to any increase in, the vitality or the morbidity associated with the disease. So,
So do they know why certain people who were, say, healthy and younger were, experienced intense symptoms in some cases?
What people forget, I think, at this stage of this disease is that this is brand new to humanity. And it takes a lot of work, effort, and data to start uncovering, what is this thing? How does it work? I mean, I've read so much stuff about it. Like today, I just read something that said that people with type O blood are a little more resistant. They're like 8 to 14% more resistant to the disease.
And A is more vulnerable, right?
I've heard that as well.
I thought that actually had come out quite a while ago now. I remember hearing
did.
something.
The A did, but the O just has recently come out.
Hmm.
Yeah, there's all sorts of things that they're finding out, and it can be ethnicity, it can, which relates ultimately into what's in your own DNA.
Yeah, I was going to say genetic markers seem to be the only
They said
theory that
something-
makes sense.
People at high altitudes, they're finding it's less morbidity for people who live at extreme elevations. So they're going, okay, what's that all about?
Well, I would assume that's because they have more experience, like their lungs are stronger from adapting to those climates and less
Could be, but
oxygenated
but
areas.
These are things that need to be investigated and proven to be true, right?
And unfortunately, we live in a time where everybody wants an answer right fucking now.
That's right. It's the same thing as when they question politicians, right? I mean, I always feel sorry, believe it or not, for politicians, which, other times I don't feel sorry for
Yeah,
politicians,
I was going to
but-
say a lot of people might not echo
Yeah.
that sentiment.
But one of the things that modern media and instant gratification has brought in us is that guys ask these incredible questions to a prime minister who, before he became prime minister, might have been a theater director or whatever. Right?
Let's just say,
And
yeah.
it says, you should have the answer on this detailed scientific question on this or on finance or
Yeah.
on trade or whatever it is. And so they have to say something, so they do, and then people chop the shit out of it.
Yeah, you can't really say the right thing no matter
No,
what.
The real thing is you should have the experts at hand and say, I'm going to direct you to the right person who can answer that in the detail that you want.
Yeah.
But that's just not how it's evolved. Anyway, we're way off topic.
No,
But,
there's no off topic
Yeah,
really
yeah,
here.
but I don't want to go down a politician and a...
Well, it's interesting stuff because I think a lot of people are thinking about that same situation every time the prime minister gives an update on COVID or the premier or whatever. Everyone's expecting, all the answers to flow, and it's just not really something that's possible at this point with such a...
And people don't want to hear some of the real detail that's out there, which is, and I think I've said this to you before, prior to now, the fastest development of a vaccine ever was the development of the mumps vaccine in the early 60s, and that took 4 years.
Really?
Yeah, that's the fastest ever. And people are saying, well, can we have this in 12 months? And it's going to be... Now, we've never had science at the level that it's at today.
Yeah, that was a long time ago, yeah.
We've never had this degree of international collaboration. We've never had $51 billion directed just at getting a vaccine. So maybe it will be 12 months, and that would be great. But there's also the luck of the draw, right? There's so many different ways to manufacture vaccines. There's different antigenic properties of the virus that you're trying to lock onto, whether it's in the spike protein or something in the shell or something in how it replicates once it's inside the cell. There's a lot of different ways to...
Your biology
build
masters
things,
is
right?
showing.
Well, there's a lot of different ways to try to either attack the virus, prevent it from doing what it does, or to actually kill the virus before it gets a chance to do what it does. And I think the other day, the New York Times just started a new tracker. They have all these different trackers related to the disease. The newest one is on vaccines. They just did the first one. There's like 172 vaccines, potential vaccines.
In development, sort
in
of?
the pipeline.
Yeah.
Most of them are at stage 0, which they're not even ready to work on humans, so they're just playing with cells.
Yeah.
But there's like 7, I think, at stage 1, 7 at stage 2, and 1 at stage 3, which is where they're doing human trials.
Wow.
So everyone's really hoping that one's going to come through. But, guys, that's the first one.
Of 70 something,
Of
yeah.
172 or something.
Yeah, whatever
like
the
that
number
that
is,
are in the
yeah.
Pipeline. So we'll see. But the other thing I think that people forget is that it may not be possible to have a vaccine at all. I mean, people have been trying to build a permanent flu vaccine, for instance, that will one shot you're good for the rest of your life kind of thing. And they
But every year they
can't
have to
do it.
tweak it, right?
Let alone colds, where they've never had a vaccine for cold at all. And these are all coronaviruses.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they're all.
I knew they were viruses,
They're all in
but-
the same family. They're all like a coronavirus type. So we'll see where this goes. The other thing people tend to forget, which is difficult in this time, is that while we have this, we still have all the other stuff out there. So you and Kelly weren't feeling well. You could have picked something else up, but whatever people pick up these days, they're instantly suspicious it's COVID.
Yeah.
And
it's hard not to be when it's being shoved down your throat by the media. Yeah.
Yeah. And because COVID to date so far has had so many different presentations, right? I mean, it can, and they're learning more about it every day too. The people who have like the sniffles and they're over it and all that, but they're finding that some people get it in the brain. It affects the heart. Of course, it screws with your lungs. Maybe it's going into your spleen or your liver. I mean, there's just...
but it's worth it to say that there's other things that'll mess you up out there because, a couple of years ago, I had a really bad virus. I've been sick, in the last 4 years, I maybe got a bug like twice or something like that. But one time was really, really bad, and I couldn't eat anything for days. I didn't basically eat any food for, 3 days, and I lost about 10 pounds in 3 or 4 days, and it was really unhealthy. And they said there was liquid in my abdomen when they did an ultrasound that they didn't really know what was up with that. And eventually everything, I got better, but that wasn't COVID because COVID wasn't around back then, but it was one of the worst experiences of my life. But I think with COVID, it's the breathing thing that made me freaked out. But then again, that could have been my anxiety really, really heaping onto that. So I don't know, but that's one of the reasons I wanted you to keep talking about this, because I think there's constantly new things coming up in the news, and I know a lot of people, they read just like the headline, and then they say, because I'm the kind of that fucking guy, and I said that stuff to you the other day that I had read, the first one being that a lot of people online were trying to say that the World Health Organization and the CDC were backtracking on a lot of stuff, saying that the whole asymptomatic spreading was not nearly as serious as they had led on.
WHO said that.
But then I said that to you, and you told me sort of further developments on that, and I because you have an actual master's in biology, you're not just someone talking out of your ass. When you read these things, you actually filter it through a scientist's sort of brain,
Like to be clear, I'm no expert either. I'm not a virologist or anything.
Well, yeah, you're not actively like a scientist or anything, but you know.
I've been reading. I try to read in-depth articles when I can, and try to,
and cross-reference.
Yeah, and double-check stuff.
Yeah.
But this is a weird beast. This one, it's. I mean, people are seeming to get over it, and then suddenly, like a month after they've been completely recovered, they seem to come down with stuff again. And so no one knows this animal yet.
It's so weird.
Yeah, and so I shouldn't call it an animal because it's not an animal, but no one understands this virus yet.
Yeah.
And it's going to be years
until we have the full story.
Yeah. They may produce a vaccine against it. Still doesn't mean they understand it. It just means they were able to build a vaccine against it, and thank God we're all waiting for that day. Especially, like you said, people in their 60s and 70s who are more at risk for really suffering if they should happen to catch this thing.
Or people who are on cancer medication already,
or
there's a myriad of things that could be suffering from. But I guess maybe at this point we should maybe take a turn.
Move on.
It's like, people are like, hey, did you miss us while you were in the pandemic? Let's talk about COVID for half an hour. But it's one of those weird things. Actually, when I was writing my notes, I was like, I gotta address some of this shit because it's been so long since I've done an episode, and I always kind of, I don't like to have much of a filter. I like to speak and share, and talking's good in these kind of situations. So as much as I don't want to make the whole focus of the show here, it would have been a weird elephant in the room to not talk about COVID.
Absolutely.
And same thing with the situation going on in the U.S. and really it affects the world with the George Floyd protests and all that. Again, not going to go into that super deep because I don't think, people want to be hearing two privileged white guys go on and on about our opinions.
Yeah.
But this should have happened a long time ago, and you should be an ally. You should definitely support all these causes and hear what these people have to say and put yourself in their shoes and check yourself and all the times that you were being an idiot or prejudiced or racist. I mean, everyone has a unique story. Everyone grows up differently. Everyone has, different situations around them. But if you're going to say that you've never been racist or never had a prejudice bone in your body, I don't think you're telling the truth, because when you're upset, when people are angry, that's just something we do. We find, and it might not be racially. It might be just like that fat fuck, or you just find some way to alienate the person that you're mad at that's different from you, because obviously that would be kind of a stupid way to insult someone, like stupid ginger, and you have ginger hair. Well, that's kind of a dumb insult. But yeah, you find a way to sort of divide and say, ugh, you're that and I'm this, or whatever it may be. It may be a male-female thing or a sexuality preference, but it's all wrong. Just And that's the part that I have a hard time wrapping my head around, because I've literally always tried to live my life like just meet someone. And then if they're an asshole, they're an asshole. But other than that, if you're not an asshole, we're good. Like, I don't care who you want to fuck. I don't care. I shouldn't say I don't care, because, you know, maybe I'll talk to you about that. Like, I don't want to say I don't care about your heritage, because I'm interested to learn about people's heritage. But I mean, I don't care in the sense that that's not going to affect whether or not I want to hang out with you. And I really have a hard time understanding people's brains that work like that. And I can only imagine it's been some kind of conditioning in the formative years of their life when they're, 0 to 10 years old, and they're being raised by someone who has their own prejudices that just bleed through, whether intentionally or not,
Absolutely. I mean, we've all seen the pictures or the videos of small children of different backgrounds, and they have no concept at all of
interracial children hugging. Exactly. And they could care less about color of the skin.
So that really argues to this is
it's something that's learned, of course. Yeah. But I don't know. Still, the people that double down, it gets me even more. The people were like wake up,
The one thing I draw some hope from in this particular time is I remember as a kid, in the 60s, watching all the social unrest and all the marches and things like that. And what you would see is you would see all of the black people together marching for their rights, and you'd see the odd white person. Mm. But the thing that's really remarkable to me about these protests are sometimes,
most of the time,
there's a real blend. You see tons of different people.
Yeah, of course, there's still tons of black people, but there's tons of Asian people and tons of indigenous people. And
lots of white people right in.
White people too, yeah.
Way more than I've ever seen before, and that gives me hope.
Yeah.
That, like, what I'd really like to see this time is some permanent change come out of this, right, to the good.
The world needs to.
Yeah, it really is. We have enough other problems with the climate, which everyone seems to have, that's gone quietly into the background.
Yeah.
Climate change, guys, if we don't get the planet straight, it's not going to matter in a couple hundred years.
Yeah, you're certainly not going to care about if somebody's a different heritage than you. That's going to be the last thing on your mind when the world's on fire.
Yeah, so let's get our priorities straight, and hey, we're all human beings. Like they say, you scrape the skin off. We're all the same underneath.
And everybody just wants to be happy in the end. Everybody just wants to find love, be successful, and everyone should have an equal shot at that, And that's the part that, as white people, we definitely have to recognize that hasn't been the case for a shit ton of other people that aren't white. And to some degree, gender as well, that's gotten better, but there's still equality all over the place. And I struggle, when this was all blowing up, I just struggle with knowing what to say, and especially with social media, because I kind of hate social media a lot of the time anyways. And in a moment like that, especially if I hadn't posted for weeks already because it's the fucking pandemic and I just haven't been very active, it's, you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. Because if you jump in, then people think, oh, well, he hasn't posted anything in weeks and now he's coming in just a virtue signal or whatever. And if you don't say something, then people say, oh, well, you don't care? You don't have an opinion about this? And my answer to that is talk to me. That's, again, why I like just sitting down with people and having an eye to, because you can tell when someone's being genuine when you're looking them in the eyes 99% of the time. And that's just,
it's hard to do in social media. Though.
Yeah, the online platform.
Twitterverse and everything else, you're speaking some cases to hundreds or to thousands at once.
Yeah.
And it's and some of them are.
Oh, you mean if you're like a celebrity or something? Yeah.
Or someone's got a following. Or
yeah.
Even just on Facebook, and everyone has their 100 to 150 or
whatever your number is. Yeah.
Whatever your number is, you saying something, and it's going to a lot of different filters.
And it's going to be inflammatory to someone almost no matter what you say.
And that's the hard thing too, and that stops some participation, because especially those of us who would be associated with having had privilege or have privilege and all this, you're walking on eggshells, because you want to show that my heart's in the right place.
You have compassion and yeah.
But will my words reflect that correctly, or will I say something that's a little off and somebody goes, hey, hang on, that's not sitting well with me? And
well, I think that in that situation, if someone says something like that, especially if they're a person of color or whatever, then the thing to do is just to recognize that and say, okay, well, thank you for calling me on that, and how can I continue to better myself, know? Yeah. And I guess I always just really tried to do that in my life as far as just being an empathetic person. Again, whether it's race or sexuality or whatever, I don't know. I just like talking to people, and it's never really been a big issue to me. But then again, even looking back at myself now that I'm an adult, I can easily locate times in my life where I felt prejudice towards other people. I didn't act on it because I'm not a piece of shit, but I still feel shitty about having those moments. But I'm talking when I was in grade 9, and the reasons for that. I remember feeling prejudice towards some people of color because I had gotten jacked a few times. Like I got my shit stolen. People come up. I got punched in the head once. They steal your weed. They stole candy from us. Like anything you fucking had. But did they do it because they were people of color? No, that was just the situation that happened to me. And even if that situation, they were people of color. Well, what I didn't understand then is they probably resented the shit out of me, not for me personally, but because I was this white middle-class fucker to them. And we literally had the buildings, the apartment buildings near our school where the lower class people lived and really tight sort of quarters that they called KD land, craft dinner land. That was the name, which is like super offensive. It's not maybe directly racist, but like in the context, it's kind of fucking racist. Yeah. So a lot of that looking back, I go, oh shit. But there, when I was a grade 9er getting my shit stolen and getting jacked and punched by some guy, it's very easy for your brain to just jump to like, oh, again, what we were talking about earlier, like what's different about this person? Because my friends who I hang out with that look like me don't do that. They don't steal my shit, Yeah. But it's nice to be able to be an adult and look back with a wider lens and be like, okay, well, they were struggling way more than me. They were trying to just get by, and they saw me as this representation of the white man holding them down,
Yeah, so I mean, that's a very good thing to think about for a second, because if we all step back and you go to Dickens' kind of England, right, where everyone's pretty much white at the time.
Hoity-toity,
right? Well, you get into it's a class warfare thing. Human beings are just not the greatest sometimes because they're always looking for a way to be better than somebody else. Right?
Yeah.
And if you can take an all-white society, you go, okay, everyone's white. But then you got the poor, you got the middle class, and you got the rich upper class.
Yeah, people always...
And with class, you have like nobility, right? You've got the professionals, and then you've got the sweeper uppers kind of thing.
Yeah.
And to some extent, we still have that with the added complexities of mixed races and things like that on top of that. So,
yeah.
And I wish we could all just be this wonderful altruistic group of human beings that just looks for the best in everybody and wants to help everybody out. And
yeah, I just wish people would look at difference as something to be embraced as opposed to something to fear,
So hopefully, like, mankind is moving in this direction, going back full circle to it being a learned behavior or learned reactions, is if whoever is at the mature part of the cycle, if we can get better there and change our teachings and our social behaviors and things so that the new folks that are being born and coming into it are getting better learning behaviors, then they're gonna be better. Mm-hmm. And then we can reach some of these goals. But
I feel very hopeful in a lot of ways for the same reason. Like, it does seem to be a real change happening. People are getting on board with the idea of not being shitty to people for no reason, just based on stuff you can't even control and stuff that shouldn't even matter. But I don't know. I'm always torn, largely because of social media and the shit you see on there. It's like for every nice moment I see, there's some asshole redneck with a Confederate flag, piece of shit, usually fully loaded, that I go like, this guy's never going to change. And he's got a bunch of friends who are never going to change. And then I'm not saying we should stop by any means. Of course, keep fighting that fight. But those people terrify me, and they make me go like, fuck, like, how do we get rid of those guys? Just got to slowly breed them out generation after generation and
educate them out. Yeah.
Just, they're so stubborn and idiotic from what I've seen. A lot of them, like it's like they revel in pissing people off or something. Like, part of it is just assholes. People are just assholes, but white supremacists just seem to be super assholes by nature.
Well, and one of the things too, and I saw it in something I read the other day, and it was a black person trying to explain what they need from white people to help turn things around. And the way it was phrased was along the lines of, I don't need white people to be woke. I mean, great if you are, but that doesn't help. You need to be actively anti-racist.
Help change the system.
You need to take action, not do what so much of society is very good at doing, which is the silent nod while they're sitting in their houses. They're not going out to the marches. They're not, actively volunteering to see what can I do to help effect change. that's always the fringe activist type, which tend to be the younger, more idealistic folks who are striving for that ideal thing.
It's like the hippies in the 60s.
Something happens when you get into your 30s and your 40s and older, not to everybody, but to, let's say, the silent majority out there. They
become complacent, kind of.
They got their jobs, they're raising families, they got to pay the mortgage, they have all this stuff. And it says, well, no, you got to do that, but you really got to do this other thing too. And well, on my downtime, I like to go to a baseball game, or I like to. I like to read, or
it's just complacency. Like, I'm too old. I got too much on my plate. It's not my problem anymore, or whatever.
And that's not helping anything.
No.
And to energize that silent mob out there, to move to the good, and to be active might change things. So we'll see if we can get there.
Well, and this, I don't know. I mean, I know there's a lot of still racism in Canada as well, and it sounds like the RCMP is still pretty fucked up in a lot of places, and there's a lot of that up here too. Not as bad, I would say, as the States, where like the light has been shining down the last couple weeks, and you're seeing every rat in every corner, and there's a lot of them. Like, it's
anyone who watched the Floyd death.
Well, what about that old guy who got pushed at the rally and blood coming out of his ears and all that? And the stuff Trump said after that too. Good Lord. Anyways,
their president is a whole other.
I don't know.
Let's not even go there.
Yeah, let's not. I'm sure everyone's already had enough of this. It was one of those things. We got to talk about it because it's the world we're living in right now, and it's important to talk about it too. So I'm glad we're talking about it. But I also, we want to have some fun here as well for the father-son connection. This is supposed to be a Father's Day episode, so. But definitely, we're going to keep I'm going to try, when we get more guests coming back on here, I'm going to try and get some guests to talk about those issues more in depth, like some for COVID, maybe someone who's actively working in virology right now, something like that. And then as far as everything that's going on with the protests and stuff, that could be an active protester, anyone from the black community who feels strongly affected, which is, I'm assuming, anyone. But I really want to get somebody, I just love being enlightened by those types of conversations. So I did actually hear there was a guy for the Ottawa protests. There was a black man who I believe was some kind of like a lawyer, and he was offering free counsel for anyone that would potentially get arrested at the protest. So I actually might try and reach out to that guy because that's badass. So back to my dad, though. Happy Father's Day again, because we're filming this a little early, but I'll say it to you on the day of.
Yeah.
We actually started recording this and we had a bit of a glitch, and the glitch came because of my dad laughed so hard at the question that I asked. I said, we're going to start off easy with a nice, easy question. And then I asked him, who's your favorite son? Not as funny now, but I got a pretty good laugh, and it like blew the mic or something.
Yeah, blew the mic.
So we had to reset, yeah. Obviously, I don't expect you to answer that. We all obviously know it's me.
But you know the answer that you'll get, which is, you're all my sons, and I love you all equally, and you all get 1/3 of the estate when I croak. So,
That's a perfect answer. Well, hey, I'm the one who stayed local at least. Yeah. I should say I have 2 brothers. Yeah, we have 3 sons my dad has, and both my brothers do not live anywhere near Ottawa anymore.
Not anymore, no.
My younger brother lives in Thailand, so we don't see him that often, but at least there's digital chat these days, thank God, yeah. Otherwise, you wouldn't get to see your grandson grow up.
Well, this is it. I mean, I think about families. I mean, immigration is not new. People have been moving around the planet for hundreds of years. But I can remember when I was a kid growing up, my parents were immigrants, right, from Ireland to Canada. Came over in the late 50s, and they would wait. They'd check the mail each day, waiting for a letter from relatives of what was going on back home, how was everyone, was grandma feeling okay, all this kind of stuff.
Can you imagine if it was bad news?
Weeks it would take for letters to go in just one direction, right? And we would make one long-distance phone call a year at Christmas, I remember.
Wow.
We'd get like 3 minutes. There'd be lag on the line. There'd be static. And everyone would be trying to talk. And because of the lag...
Sounds terrible.
Oh, it was horrible. All you'd really get out of there was like, everyone okay?
Yeah.
Everyone all right?
I love you. Merry Christmas.
Yeah. Merry Christmas. And it'd be over. And then we get the phone bill and go, oh my God, like it's cost a lot of money for 3 minutes. And now you're getting high quality video,
HD,
and sound.
yeah.
It's instantaneous.
Feels like you're there. Filters, stupid filters you don't need.
Devices. They can walk around and show you the house or the outside, and you go, it's just almost like being there.
Yeah.
So,
Such a different time. I can't even imagine if you waited weeks and weeks for a letter And if it was a letter about something important, like maybe someone was really sick, if the letter wasn't super detailed with everything you wanted to know,
You'd just be left with more questions.
yeah, you'd be like, fuck, now I got to write a letter saying, like, you didn't mention so-and-so, and you'd have to wait for
And
another
you get
month.
These letters, they'd be these little airmail letters, right? And they'd be so flimsy, the paper. It's almost like onion skin. You know what onion skin is?
Yeah.
Paper? Yeah. So
I've cut an onion, Dad.
yeah. So this is paper they used to call onion skin paper. Well, those are old airmail.
Oh, onion skin paper. Sorry, I thought you were asking me if I know what onion skin is.
No. That the letters were so thin and light, and I remember my grandma's letters from Ireland, and every inch of open space, every little piece of open paper would have writing on it.
Good Lord.
You know, it's just like you'd read this, then you'd flip it over, then you'd read the margins sort of thing and everything, because there wouldn't be a piece of open paper.
Yeah.
Because there'd be so much to say, and they're trying to fit it all in.
And it was expensive, yeah.
Yeah. And it got better.
That reminds me of, I think, Mom, actually, because my mom, your wife, she worked in retirement homes for a long time, and she told me about some of the people that had told her stories of growing up in the Depression. And one story that always stuck with me, she said one woman told her that they would like wipe their ass with a single piece of toilet paper and then fold that piece of toilet paper and go in for seconds. You're going in narrow with a half piece of toilet paper that's already got shit inside of it.
Toilet paper was a lot tougher back then.
Yeah, I guess probably gritty sandpaper toilet paper, but man, that's rough either way when you want to. At that point, why not?
Even my mom used to, because my mom was a girl during the Second World War in Ireland, and everything was rationed, right? So you get like a half a pound of butter for a week for a family of 5 or something like that. And that was back when they'd use butter for everything.
Yeah, for all the recipes.
And
Yeah.
sugar and flour and all those things. And one of the things, so my mom was getting older and older. I don't know if part of her was going back to when she was younger, because we would find pieces of saran wrap or wax paper or tin foil that had been used and used and used and used. Like, I mean, younger people today, it's more a disposable society. So what they grew up with, they take a piece of saran wrap, use it once, and after they toss it, right?
And that's why we have a Texas-sized garbage island in the ocean.
That's right, yeah. So
Several,
some
actually.
it's better, but man, sometimes, especially the tin foil, you'd see it's got little holes in it and everything because it's been bent and bent.
Well, it's just ingrained in her at such a young
yeah.
age that it just becomes part of your mentality.
habits.
Yeah,
That's right. Yeah.
That's crazy. Well, I guess speaking of, we might as well start talking about you. Your roots growing up in Brantford. I don't know was your childhood pretty much uneventful or like as worth glossing over? Brantford's like home of Wayne Gretzky and Alexander Graham Bell did the telephone shit there, right? Or was he just born there?
No, he was born in Scotland.
Oh, so that's where the
Yeah.
What's the significance? Do you know?
Yeah, there's an area in Brantford called Tootla Heights, which is a very large bank overlooking the Grand River. It's a very nice part of town, actually. And he had a summer estate there because he spent a lot of his time in Nova Scotia, I think it was, where he had a place. He spent time at the summer home in Brantford, and then he did a lot of his working time, I think it was in Boston.
Somewhere in the States, yeah. I knew that, yeah.
So what it was Brantford has this claim as the home of the telephone where Alexander Bell invented the telephone.
Oh.
And I think it's actually a fair claim because they found in the home, that's where he did all of his original schematic designs for the first telephone. But Boston says
that's where the call was made from, right?
There. Well, I think he built the first prototypes perhaps, and they may have done the first transmissions down in Boston.
Yeah, I can't remember. The first one was to Paris, I think.
No, that was claimed as the first long-distance telephone.
Oh.
It's from Brantford to Paris, and folks, that's not Paris, France. That's Paris, Ontario.
Oh, okay.
Which is like,
not as far at all.
6 miles away from Brantford or something like that. So that was officially the first long-distance telephone call. So they each have a fair foot in the claim of.
So it's arguable, I guess.
Yeah.
But Brantford still has Gretzky.
Yeah, always have.
And wasn't his dad like a staple of the community, right?
Oh, he still is.
He still is. Yeah, he puts on hockey tournaments and stuff.
Well, I mean, Walter's fairly old now, I think.
Yeah, he must be.
I haven't kept up with him, but.
But you've met him?
No. What I mean is I haven't kept up with his life at this point and all that.
But I thought your dad knew him, right?
No, it's more like my dad may have met him.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure he told me that,
and
like
my
community
brother
style,
too,
Yeah.
Some fundraiser because Wayne used to come back to Brantford even after he was famous, right?
Yeah.
And he had a golf tournament for the blind and stuff like that.
Yeah, he seems like a really good dude.
Tennis tournament, yeah. Yeah, so funniest thing about that, a couple of quick notes. used to be when you would drive into Brantford for years and years, they had a sign of his hockey jersey with the 99, so
Edmonton,
you
probably,
see
yeah.
home of Wayne Gretzky. So you always know where he lived or where he grew up.
And they still have Wayne Gretzky Parkway or something, right?
Yeah, they still do.
Yeah.
But the funniest thing about Wayne Gretzky is the guy's a hockey player, right? And Brantford built this thing, and to be fair, it has a couple of ice pads. But its big thing is it's got a big wave pool or something like that. It's the Wayne Gretzky Aquatic Center. And it just doesn't sound right.
No,
Right?
that's hilarious.
Yeah. So I always thought that was a bit weird. But
Yeah.
anyway.
Gretzky. Did it have like animals there or no? It's just like a place for like water sports
yeah.
and stuff?
Yeah, no, it's just a water.
Because that'd be even funnier if it was like a marine land.
No.
Yeah, aquatic
just,
center.
Just aquatic center.
Yeah. Okay, well, that kind of covers Brantford, I guess.
It doesn't really. To be fair to Brantford, I mean.
No, I meant your experience. Like,
Yeah.
well, hey, if you want to keep talking Brantford, I'm sure some people will.
Well, like from a growing up perspective, like, I mean, we grew up in what would be called a solid, blue collar household, right? My father, he was an immigrant and he worked as a general laborer, and
He was in a factory or something, right?
yeah, I mean, he did a few things when he first hit town, sort of thing, fresh off the boat, as they say, or off the plane. He actually flew over. But he ended up working at a place called Muttart's, which made prefabricated houses and also had a lumber yard. And he worked there for years and generally worked his way up to be the superintendent of the plant. I mean, he did well for himself. But
He had a messed up hand, too.
yeah, he did. Yeah, my father was born with it was from a nerve compression.
Yeah, like it was kind of locked in.
Yeah, he had what was called a claw hand.
Yeah, that sounds way more hardcore.
Well, but it was pretty effective because his fingers were all turned in.
Yeah, he couldn't
When
like.
you show up the camera, that was his
Yeah,
hand.
it was like
and
locked
he
in.
could move it like that far.
Yeah.
But he never held him back. It was his
that's what I
It
mean.
was his right hand actually, so because he's left-handed. Either I don't know if he was naturally left-handed
Or if he just
or if
adapted.
He became
Yeah.
left-handed because he had to out of necessity. But he used to swing a hammer with.
It was from birth then?
Yeah, it was from birth, from a stricture or compression on a nerve that caused it to clench, and
Just stayed like that for too
Yeah.
long.
exactly so. And
Crazy.
A cruel thing was said to my dad late in life by a doctor, and I'm talking pretty late in life, like he was in his 60s, I think, and he was in for something, and he was talking to a surgeon, and the surgeons, they love seeing stuff like this. They go, oh, what do you got going on here, kind of a thing.
Yeah,
And
it's
stuff like
interesting
that.
to
And
figure it out.
Yeah, and he told my dad exactly what had caused this sort of thing. He said if you're born with that today, we'd fix it right away, and you would have been fine.
Could it have been fixed at some point during his life or no?
No,
It would have had to be.
Yeah, no, I think sort of in today's technology or the technology when he was in his 60s.
If a newborn had that.
Newborn had that
Yeah.
today, we would fix it right away.
Crazy.
And you would have.
Why would you tell someone that?
Well, that's the point, right? So our doctors are wonderful. They do great things for us, but man, some of them don't have the bedside touch, right? I mean,
Feels like a bit of a nana boo boo kind of
yeah,
moment.
Like Dad didn't need to hear that.
Yeah, that's just gonna make someone feel shitty. No, there's no good in that. Well, I don't know. Unless there's any other stories of your youth that people would find interesting.
Here's where you go. I mean, everyone has a life where you have a lot of things happen, and definitely I had some interesting things happen to me in the part of growing up, but to try to pick one out or pick a couple.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I was more just because I was trying to get to sort of where your story intertwines with mine, i.e., meeting my mom, and you guys went to university in Guelph.
Yep.
And
That's
you
where-
studied
yep.
bugs, right? Essentially, that's the layman's way of putting it.
Yeah, well, when I met your mom, I had actually finished my undergraduate, so I was done.
Yeah.
Except I'd been accepted into the master's, so I had the summer to kill, right? So instead of going home to Brantford and getting a summer job in Brantford I stayed in Guelph, and I got a job on campus in a lab.
Oh.
The guy who gave us the jobs, his name was Professor Gord Surgener, who's retired now, a great guy. He used to hire about 10 or 15 students every summer because he was an entomologist, and he was very...
Which is someone who studies bugs, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's right, yeah, insects.
Yeah.
Scum insects, because bugs are actually a very particular part of like all the orders of insects. There's one that are what they call true bugs.
Oh, I thought bugs were like a slang term.
It's a slang term.
It kind
as
of
well,
is,
but
yeah.
There is a group called the true bugs.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Weird.
yeah.
Okay,
Anyway.
sidetrack.
Yeah. So he'd hire 10 or 15 kids, and he had a lot of contracts because he was doing a lot of agricultural entomology. So how do we get rid of the pests that are eating the corn or the wheat or all this kind of stuff? And the ones that are bothering, like the cows and the horses and like face flies,
Problem
and horn
insects.
flies and things like this, problem insects.
Yeah.
And he'd get contracts with different companies who were either making various pest control formulas or mechanical controls, and we would help him gather data. Like the summer I worked there, I would put on this thing that looks like a jetpack full of insecticides, insecticide of the week kind of thing, and I'd go to dairy farms and I would spray down all the stalls and things like that.
Did you have like a gas mask on?
I had a full suit, man.
Oh, you were like a
I was
hazmat kind of?
Yeah, and I was fogging some nasty stuff, probably, I'd say.
Yeah, hopefully you didn't inhale any of it. I guess
well, I was all done up, masks, respirators, all that kind of stuff.
They had good
anyway,
gear.
So what we do, just so you know, like we would hang strips of paper with little squares on them at various spots around the barns, right? And then what happens is flies land on the paper, and the flies take a little shit on the paper, and they leave a mark. And so in a really bad place, you'd get these strips back because we take them back to the lab, and you'd have to count the little shit specks, right? And that was a measure of how many flies were there.
Okay.
Right? And sometimes, man, there would be a lot.
It sounds like a blast of a way to spend your summer counting fly shit.
You do the fogging and stuff like that, and then you'd hang the strips, and you'd count, and you see how many weeks it would take for them to come back up, so you see how long was the insecticide being effective, right, and things like that. So it's all part of trial.
Did this work as like a credit for you, or were you actually getting paid to do this?
No, I was done school. I didn't need a credit. This was
getting
a paycheck.
Oh, all right. That's not so bad then.
And that was just one of them. So we did several other types. We did a lot of work within mosquitoes. That was more your mom, actually, because we would set up mosquito traps all around. That was at a time, actually, the late 70s, when there was a thing called equine encephalitis, or Eastern equine encephalitis.
That's horses, right? Equine?
Equine.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
So it's an encephalitis of horses originally, but it was spread by mosquitoes, and if it infected humans, it could get very sick and maybe die.
Shit.
So it's just like today we have West Nile.
Yeah.
You know? So every once in a while you get one of these things.
Something blows up.
Yeah, where some insect transmits it, and if a human gets it, it's bad. And if it's enough, then suddenly there's grant money to try to figure this thing out. Figure out how we're going to
try to curb it.
Yeah, so there's a lot of that summer, and that's what your mom was doing. Was we would put out carbon dioxide traps all around the town and things like that, and capture the mosquitoes, and then we'd have to sort through them and identify them because there'd be 3 or 4 different species, right? And
there's different kinds of mosquitoes.
Oh, sure there are. There's
I guess I should have expected a yes to that.
Yeah. You've got Aedes tricereatus, which is a great big mosquito that comes out early in the spring. You've got Culex pipiens, which is one of the most common mosquitoes you get sort of all summer long. They're sort of medium-sized and nasty little guys. And then you've got ones that we never used to have here, and maybe we still don't have them here, Aedes aegypti and things like that would transmit things like yellow fever, and very bad if they get up here.
See, this is why I wanted to ask you about bugs, because it blows my mind that you can still pull these scientific names out for 3 different kinds of mosquitoes. Like, it's not something you're actively studying for like decades, and you can still just...
Well, but I don't think that's any great brilliance of mine. What I think it is all of us, I think, when we're at a certain age, like, I don't know, from like maybe 15 to 25 or 30, what you're going to find when you get into your 50s and 60s and maybe later, those are easy things to remember. The things that happen to you at that point in your life are like well recorded in your brain, and you can.
It's when you're your healthiest, probably.
Yeah, I don't know. It's all new, and you're studying it really hard sometimes too.
That's true.
If you're in school, like you spend hours and hours in your.
I guess I can relate, because there's songs I remember learning on the guitar when I was like 15 that I cannot play for 4 years and still just play the bass line and the guitar, and so I guess that makes sense. But
wait till you're 55 or something, and you learn that, and then try to don't play it till you're 60 and see if you can do it. And my guess is no, because you don't know what you had for lunch the day before.
Yeah, I guess, but you're still pulling these out, so isn't that kind of counter to that?
What I mean is stuff from when you're young is better encoded and more resilient memories than the memories you make when you're in your 30s, 40s, 50s.
Oh, okay. So you're saying if I was to write a song right now, okay.
Yeah.
Huh. Okay, well, I still think it's a
Not
really...
to say that I don't know some stuff. I do know some stuff.
No, for sure. Well, the main reason that I think you've always kind of inspired me to try to learn more is because I feel like you're the closest person I've ever met to like a human encyclopedia. Because not only do you know a lot of stuff, but you know a wide range of stuff. And sometimes you surprise me. You have a few weak spots. I'd say probably like sports and music are probably like your low points. Because I know you're just someone who doesn't like music that much, which I find really weird.
And yet, actually, I agree with you on the sports. Not a strong sports guy. Never been involved in a lot of sports or cared to watch sports.
No, me neither.
Except for tennis. I really like watching tennis, and I got quite into tennis there for a while. And I knew enough hockey because Dad watched hockey. So in order to have a conversation with my dad.
Yeah. I learned a lot about hockey when I was a kid just to talk to him too.
Talk to him, 'cause that's,
yeah. But, okay. So, well, I mean, I still think that's a really weird romance story. Like, yeah, we were collecting mosquitoes together. That sounds like a terrible time.
That's just how we met. I mean, the romance was I saw her and I thought, ooh.
Okay. I don't need to know the rest of that story. We know it results in me and my brothers, so
that's right,
we'll just skip past that. I actually did write down, though, because I thought this would be an interesting question, since you guys were clearly interested in insects and arachnids and all that. Do you have a favorite invertebrate and why?
Oh, that's an interesting question.
Like, I assume you know cool things about their armor or their, like, adaptive sort of evolutionary, I've learned a lot of interesting things just on nature shows, but you really were in the thick of it when it comes to studying bugs.
I mean, the better question for me was, do I have a favorite protozoan?
Because you were really about, like, microbial level stuff,
Yeah,
right?
I mean, that was my master's, right?
Parasitology, right?
Well, parasitology was the field, so the study of parasites. And I say that not to insult your audience, but because so often when people used to ask me what I did, and I said, well, I studied parasitology, they'd say, oh, parapsychology, that's so cool.
Oh.
I had that more than once.
Yeah. I think I saw my grandma a couple nights ago.
Right, yeah.
She died 8 years ago.
So I say parasites.
Yeah.
Parasites.
No, that's smart.
Yeah, but the particular parasite that I worked on for my master's was a protozoan parasite. So a protozoan is a one-celled organism.
Like an amoeba or something?
An amoeba is a protozoan, that's right.
That's the only one I know.
One cell. Well, you got red blood cells, white blood cells.
Oh.
Those are all one cell things. Now, they're not individual organisms because they can't live on their own.
Yeah.
Right? So, but yeah, there's an amoeba.
Oh, paramecium? Is that another one?
I want to say yes.
I pulled a science word out of my ass.
Yeah, no, that's good. Yeah, that's paramecium would be one. There's tons of them, right? Yeah.
Nerd points.
Yeah. The E. coli, there you go. All bacteria are
He's a less popular one.
Yeah, well, so is bacteria.
No one really wants to hang out with him.
But the one that I worked on anyway was what's called a trypanosome, or the genus is Trypanosoma. So a trypanosome, actually that ties into my wall gift.
Yeah, well, we'll find out. Well, I mean, you could tell us now if it ties in. It doesn't really matter when you present
it
that.
It ties in directly.
Yeah, so show it. So my dad brought something to put on the wall like we normally ask of the guests.
Probably won't show on...
Oh, I've seen this before. This is the one you...
I have one in my office, but this is another one I have just for you. So I don't know if that'll show or not, but...
This is you just like...
Geeking out?
No, this is because this is the one you discovered, right? And you got to name?
That's right. This is the one that I
So this is you just dropping your big science dick on the table.
Maybe. So trypanosomes are very interesting because... in Africa, they are the organism that causes sleeping sickness, which most people have heard of.
I have not.
You have not heard of
sleeping sickness?
Yeah.
So you get sick when you go to bed?
Well, no,
or you can't sleep.
It's a disease as it progresses. You get a lethargy, and you're kind of like that.
Shit.
It goes around in the bloodstream, right? And it's passed by an insect vector, a tsetse fly. You ever heard the tsetse fly?
Nope.
No,
sounds like you're saying sexy fly.
No,
from here.
Tsetse fly.
Tsetse, okay.
Yeah, and it would bite and spread the parasite from from it being what's called the vector. So
whoever has it first, right?
Yeah, what takes it to the host, to the host, to the host, right? Yeah, so you're infected, it bites you, it gets it. It goes through certain life cycle inside the vector often, and then the vector bites the next person and injects it into the bloodstream. The next person, now they have the disease.
And was there a cure for it or no?
Well, it's a horrible disease, and they have more effective treatments for it today, especially if they catch it early, right? When it's in your general bloodstream, You can take a drug, at least you used to be able to, and it would wipe it out, and bingo, you're cured, right?
Cool.
But in the old days, and this is in Africa, right, sub-Saharan Africa for the sleeping sickness one, people would get it, and there was no good medical treatments nearby, so you would suffer. And eventually what this organism does is it crosses what's known as the blood-brain barrier.
Uh-oh.
It gets into the brain. And that's very difficult to treat because at the time when it, going back a ways, the only way you get it, that brain get across the blood-brain barriers with heavy metal drugs, with antimony and arsenic and things like that. And so one of these things where the cure is almost as bad as the disease. So a very nasty disease. And anyway, mine is not that though. So these trypanosomes, I gave you like the worst case kind of trypanosome.
From the same family.
Yeah,
Okay.
same genus. Causes this disease in humans. Well, they're in frogs, they're in bats, they're in cats, they're in all. So this particular one is from the blood of a tree frog that we have here in Canada, in Ontario, called Hyla versicolor. You'll hear them sort of in a wet July night, or even I think you got to be
croaking.
You'll hear them bleeding, kind of this trill that they do because they go up into the trees and they'll sing.
I didn't know we had tree frogs in Canada. I always thought it was like a South American thing.
No, we have them here, Hyla versicolor. They got these little sticky pad kind of.
Yeah, they're cool when you see them in the pet store and stuff. Yeah.
This is the one we have here. It's called the common gray tree toad, actually they call it.
But it's actually a frog?
It's a frog. It's a tree
How do they do
frog.
shit like that?
I don't know.
You want to slap that scientist who fucking named it a toad? And like, Steve, it's a frog. He's like, guys, it's going to be hilarious.
Yeah, and their coloration can go from gray to green. But anyway, so that's the one I was studying. And, so I would go out on hot summer nights, wet summer nights, and catch a bunch of these guys and bring them back. And I would take a little bit of blood from them, and we'd look at the smear and sort of see, is it infected or not? What's it infected with? Because there's not only this trypanosome, there's other trypanosomes as well. And they have different morphologies, so they don't all look the same, right? And anyway, this particular one, when I found it and we tried to identify it, we couldn't identify it. We couldn't find any previous examples of it, right? So the way you identify it, you do a lot of measurements of, the general body shape and length and how this thing called the flagellum.
I remember that word from science class.
Yeah.
It's like the tail, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, it's it's a tail, and then you get this undulating membrane, which is the flagellum kind of running along the.
Yeah, that thing looks pretty gnarly, actually.
Yeah. It's hard to believe, like that's just one cell, and you see that's the nucleus, the big dot there, and this other smaller dot's called the kinetoplast. That's where the flagellum ends.
You know what it looks like? It looks like a fishing lure. It even has a little hook at the end.
Yeah. It's a neat little guy.
So, okay, when you're studying and you're like, guys, I can't identify this. Is that like a mad like nerd boner moment at that point where you're just like, I found a new one?
It was exciting insofar as that we didn't know what it was, but then you had to prove it was new.
Oh.
So that's where you had to do all these detailed
Back it all up,
measurements.
yeah.
And you've got to go through all the scientific literature, looking at everyone that's been found in frogs, any kind of frog in the world, like, is this it, And then I would do trials too, called host specificity trials. So another thing I did was I would go out in the swamps, and I would collect masses of eggs from different species of frogs, right?
Oh.
Leopard frogs, tree frogs, the spring peepers.
You just grab them and take them.
Cricket frogs, yeah.
The mom comes back like, what the fuck?
Mom wasn't there anyway. But yeah, I would take them back to the lab, and then I had all these different pans, and I would hatch them out into tadpoles and then take them through to their adult stage. And the reason I did that, rather than just collecting adults, was because I needed to have a host that was clean, right? It didn't have any
Picked up something
parasites or
else.
anything.
Yeah.
It had to be a clean host.
Interesting.
And then I would take small samples of this, and I would inoculate it into them.
Ew,
And then
sucks to
later
be those frogs.
Then I would take blood samples from them to see, did the infection take or not? So did it go into a leopard frog, a cricket frog, a spring peeper, a wood frog, all the different types of frogs that we have, and or not. And actually, this one is extremely host specific.
Really?
It really only went into Hyla, frogs of the genus Hyla.
So tree frogs only.
Yeah, exactly. So
Crazy.
no other
So
frog.
did you work on that all by yourself, or were you with like a team? And then do you guys fight over who gets to name it?
No, this is me. So when you do your research for your PhD or your master's, whatever, you have your own project.
Oh, it's like your
right?
thesis
That's
kind of
right,
thing.
exactly,
Yeah, okay.
It's my thesis. Now, what you do have is you have a supervisor, right, who's usually the professor who's
Your mentor, kind of.
Yeah, well, he's the one. It's his lab space he's giving you, and he helps you sketch out your project and give you advice and guidance and stuff like that. And for that, he gets to put his name on all your papers. You get to be lead author, but he gets to be on there too. Fair is fair.
You like name this after him or something?
I named this after another parasitologist, not my supervisor, because he's on the paper. You would never name it after yourself. You don't do.
It'd be redundant,
It's
kind
like
of.
bad form.
Yeah.
You just don't do that, right?
Yeah.
So you honor someone else often, and who we honored was a quite famous Canadian parasitologist called Roy C. Anderson.
Okay.
And he was a worm guy, really. He wasn't a protozoan parasitologist. He was more into nematodes. That was his thing, I think. But he's very well known. He's passed, so he's been gone for a while now. But I named it after Dr. Anderson, who was always a very nice guy to me. And it's new to science. That's my little claim to fame. I can be dead and gone, but this will stand.
If
right?
somebody looks this parasite
so
up,
what I brought you this picture to put on your wall.
Yeah, I think you should show the camera just because it looked.
I did.
Oh, did you already? Okay. Because it looks really cool.
And then for you, I brought these, which are my 4 published papers in the Canadian Journal of Zoology.
Oh, damn.
Right? And it takes you sort of basically through a lot of what I discovered with this animal. So it's the life cycle. It's, trials I did in leeches to see could leeches take it from frog.
Do you have more copies of these, though?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I didn't want to,
But I'm
have the
giving
only
these
ones.
to you. Well, I don't have a lot of copies. These are,
Oh, yeah, I'll take care of them.
Yeah, this is for when I'm dead and gone, and you're talking to your grandchildren. You say, you want to know something about your great-grandpa? What he did?
I'd probably just show them this podcast, if I'm being honest. Well, it would be from the horse's mouth, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Well, that's pretty cool. You never really answered what was your favorite invertebrate, though.
Well, that's because I said you should ask what's your favorite protozoan.
Okay, so yeah, okay, fair enough. That was a good deflection. All right, well, let's speed up a little further in your life and at least touch on something that probably people from this area would be familiar with, which was, I think one company changed into the other, right? But BNR, Bell Northern Research, and then eventually Nortel. Was that like?
Yeah, when we came to Ottawa, we came to work for the National Research Council, right?
Which you ended your you came full circle, yeah.
Yeah, that's right. So when I finished this master's, then I went to London to Western Ontario and did a second master's there in library science.
Which I always wondered what the hell that even means, library science.
Well, it's when you become a librarian, you have a set of skills, just like if you become a nurse like Kelly or anything else, you learn a set of skills that allows you to do a certain job, profession.
But haven't libraries changed so much?
Well, all professions change with it.
Yeah, I guess. But libraries went from like the Dewey Decimal System or whatever, right, to like now you just type in whatever you're looking for on a computer.
Use a Dewey Decimal System in most public libraries.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I haven't been to a library in a really long time.
Yeah. Or if you go to universities, it's the Library of Congress classification system that you use. So there's different classification systems. But you're right. I mean, in fact, when I was in library school, it was kind of a pivotal time because computer-based automation of these types of databases was really starting to go.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of very active development.
Everything changed over a short amount of time,
And then certainly in my lifetime then, I mean, when I graduated, I was offered a job at the National Research Council in what was called the Canada Institute for Scientific and Technical Information, or CISTI. Right?
Yeah, I remember that acronym.
Right. And it's sort of, even at the time, was sort of Canada's national science library. Because that's why I went to library school, because when I finished my first master's, at that point I was married, right? We'd gotten married, and your mom wanted to know when we could have kids. And
Typical woman. No, I'm just kidding. I'm joking.
No. But she wanted to be a mother. She wanted to have children, and she wanted to know when could we have kids. And she and I, both being eldest children, were conservative by nature. And so I said, well, we want some security, financial security and all that before we start having kids. And so we did what
Good plan.
we saw as the best timeline for that to happen. So it was to me get my PhD, which was going to be 4 years because I was doing live animal experiments. And then I'd compete for a postdoctoral fellowship somewhere, and those are usually 2 years that you would do postdoc. Then you would compete for an opening as a junior professor somewhere in some university. And when you could say you had real security is when you have tenure, right? You hear
Yeah,
professor has
I've heard that
tenure,
term, yeah.
right? So when you have tenure, you're kind of locked in, and you're good to go as long as you continue to perform. But to get tenure, you've got to do well with getting research grant money. You've got to do well publishing. You have to have an active graduate student program of your own students that you're getting degrees, and you have to do really well at teaching, right? And if you fail in any of those areas, it can make it tricky, right? And if you don't hit on all cylinders, you won't necessarily get tenure.
Yeah.
Anyway, so we did a best case timeline. I was going to be like 35 or something like that before. If everything went swimmingly, this is where it would be. And Mom kind of said, well, that's too long. I don't want to wait till I'm in my mid to late 30s to have kids.
Yeah, especially if you want multiple kids.
Yeah,
kind of,
exactly.
I understand
so
that.
she said, what else can you do?
And then career shift.
Well, an interesting thing was happening was that there was a woman that I knew who was exactly in my shoes. She was doing a master's in parasitology. She was a year ahead of me, though. So we were having lunch one day, and she was getting near the end of her program. I said, so, like, what are you doing? You going to do a doctorate somewhere, or where are you going next, kind of thing? She said, I'm going to University of Western Ontario because I'm going to be a librarian. I'm going to get another master's. I said, really? And it was interesting to me because in this period of time, late 70s, early, it wasn't a great time for jobs in universities in science. So it's like anytime you get the degree, doesn't mean you're going to get a job, right? So I said, why are you doing that? And she said, because there's a crying need for librarians with science backgrounds. If you think about all the research libraries in the world and things like that, but most librarians tend to be history, at the time anyway, a lot of history or English majors and things like that. So at the University of Guelph, at the McLaughlin Library, second floor science, if I went there and went up to librarian and said, look, I'm looking for some research studies on blood triple mastigotes.
They wouldn't really be able to help you in a big way. Yeah.
They look at me and go like, you're talking Swahili, right? And that's not a slight on them. These are very intelligent people. And well, a good librarian will tell you, even if they don't know the topic material inside out, they'll still help you.
Yeah.
But it's a lot easier if you have some context from your own knowledge base, right? Your innate knowledge base. And so research libraries like to hire people who have double masters, one in library science and one in some discipline, math, science, genetics, whatever it is, right? And at SISTE, that was like the place in the country where this happened the most. So anyway, I ended up going to work there. I worked there for about 8 years, and I got into some, another interesting time as we started to get away from, well, I guess it was still mostly published materials at the time, but we're getting a lot of bibliographic database development, index databases, where now you could do online searching and find that this paper was published in this volume, this page.
Was that like the early 90s or something?
No, that was
late 80s?
That would be, early 80s.
Oh.
Early to mid 80s, yeah, that was going on. And so I ended up working in a place called CanOlay, the Canadian Online Inquiry, because SISTE was doing some of these first scientific bibliographic databases, and I ended up doing technical writing describing the new databases that we would get and how to search them and all that kind of stuff. Even did a little bit of teaching other librarians how to do it, like I would go around to universities and that. But then, working for the government, I had an impediment in that I didn't speak French.
Oh.
Yeah. And I tried going to night classes, but, you said some nice things about me earlier, but one of the things that I do not do well is I do not do foreign languages well.
Yeah, well, I would think a lot easier when you start learning them at a young age. Some people are obviously just good at languages, but...
Well, and a lot of people, I think, were willing to work a lot harder at learning French than I was willing to do. I gave it a go, and after a while...
Well, and you didn't grow up around this area where it would have been a lot more prevalent in your life if you had grown up in Ottawa, because we're so close to Quebec here. But because in my childhood, like, even though I don't really speak good fluent French, it's always been a present sort of factor in my life. Is French always been close,
Yeah.
Okay, so, but how does that relate to you ending up at Nortel? Because Nortel...
So I saw, at some point, I said to your mom, I said, this lack of French is going to hold me back. I'm not going to be able to progress into management, basically, because you had to be bilingual for management jobs, because you're supervising people and they can work in their native preferred language, right? So I started looking outside of the government, and that's how I ended up eventually. I went for interviews at several places, but I ended up going to Bell Northern Research, which was the R&D arm of Northern Telecom, it was called at the time.
Oh. So they were already the same groups, kind of.
Yeah, basically. But one was pure R&D. And when you went to work at Bell Northern, it's like you're working on a university campus, guys in sandals and shorts and T-shirts and stuff.
Kind of like lax.
Which was, I just come from 8 years of government where I wore a tie and jacket to work.
It must have been kind of nice, yeah.
It was. It was a real change. But it was a real challenge, too, because I was doing technical information development. So it's like a technical writer, and I was writing for what was called a circuit board design system, and in a group that also did silicon design. So if that sounded a little foreign to you, it was just as foreign to me, because my forte was biology, and suddenly now it was all electricity and ohms and volts and all this kind of stuff, and
kind of a different scientific discipline.
So I went back to Algonquin at nights and took courses.
Jesus.
Basic electricity and electronics, fiber optics, and things like that. And it took me 6 months, I'd say, to start feeling comfortable and to feel like I actually knew what I was writing about. So I was writing for 6 months and really not understanding the material.
That's a really good example, though, of what more people should try to do, which is being open to change. Because I remember growing up, because, when you were at Nortel was sort of when my memories, that's where I start remembering. I don't know how old I would have been then. When did you go there?
I started in October of 1990.
Yeah, so I was 5 years old. So exactly, all through the 90s, that was your job. But even at that age, I remember thinking, like, why did they study bugs then? And now you're telling me, the library science stuff ultimately was kind of phased out of what you needed to do, at least for this company. So I just think it's kind of refreshing when you're somebody and you're like, oh, where's my life going? I think a lot of people have that. And it's nice to see someone else who's doing well at this stage in your life, to see that you had a lot of zigs and zags and all over the place, but you kept putting in the work and you kept being open to that change and being open to learning more. And I don't know, that's interesting that.
Well, I think that's true of a lot of people, and to a young person, I would say, study what you like and learn what you like and all that, and you meet certain people who have innate skills, like with music, with art.
Just naturally inclined.
Just that's their thing, that's their passion, and they're good at it, So you just know this person, whatever they do, this is going to be their thing, right? And then you've got other people who may not have like an innate talent, but they say, I want to be this, and they still have the passion. I want to be a doctor, or I want to be a this or a forester. Or I want to, whatever.
Yeah, whatever it is.
And they go for it, right? Then you have people like me, and I think there's a lot of people like me who aren't sure what they are. I went off to university. I didn't know what I wanted to be. I just knew I was going to university. I wasn't even sure, like, should I go science? Should I go something else? But I ended up going into science. And that's fine. I really enjoyed it. But a lot of people end up, but even as I was getting near the end, I honestly think one of the reasons I went for a master's was I didn't see any job prospects, and I still didn't really know what I wanted to do. Like my undergraduate was in fisheries and wildlife biology.
It's all over the place, yeah.
Well, it's fisheries and wildlife biology.
Well, it's related, but compared to where you ended up, it's all over the place.
Yeah.
Like,
well, that's right. But funny things will happen. Like, so I go to Bell Northern Research, and I'm working, as an information developer, they called it, but technical writer. And then I get a call out of the blue one day, and it's from the research library of it's Bell Northern Research Library. And they said, hey, we've heard that you've got a degree in librarianship. And I said, yeah, it's true.
You're like, I haven't been using it, but.
And they said, well, we have an open position for a manager. Would you come and interview for it? So I said, sure. So I did, and I got the job. So now all of a sudden, I'm back in a library environment. It's a research library at Bell Northern, and eventually Bell Northern and Northern Telecom all collapsed into one thing called Nortel.
Yeah, but I'm sure it didn't hurt to have all that acquired electricity knowledge, and
that was still the thing, right?
Yeah, it all kind of plays into the same.
That was their business. But then eventually another transition happened where, and I helped engineer this a little bit at Nortel. The library, we're exiting the era of printed materials, especially research materials. Everything was going into online electronics. So we helped make that shift. But as a result, the library itself really shrunk down. So a big part of the old libraries was management,
just storage,
and all that kind of stuff. And that was all gone. And now researchers could start accessing stuff from their desktops. They didn't even have to come to a physical library anymore. Right, so
that's pretty huge.
Yeah, so one thing led to another, and so I had an opportunity to move somewhere else in the company, which I did, which was into human resources. But not as an HR person per se, because I had no skills there, but as on the research side of it, looking into databases that could be used in human resources area, because there's a lot of them, skills databases, development databases.
So again, you kind of shifted though.
I shifted, and I ended up working on a project to build a jobs database inside the company, right? Which we worked with a company called Monster.com.
Yeah, I remember Monster.
Yeah, they were huge.
Yeah, they were big. They were in the States and everything. You used to travel a bunch too.
Yeah, that's right. And so I did that, and then that led me, once I was in that sort of area, when I finished doing that, I got an opportunity to work with this system called SAP, which is what's called an ERP, an enterprise resource planning software, which is software that runs every aspect of your business: the finances, the materials management, your HR. Like, it's all one big huge thing.
Is that smart to do? Because then if that software crashes, you're fucked.
Yeah, although it's so big that you'd hardly ever get a crash that would bring everything down. It's more like your HR piece might fail for a bit or whatever. But yeah, it's a reasonable question, because ERPs, all your eggs are kind of in.
That's what I was thinking when you described it. Yeah.
But you get a lot of wins from that, right? Too, like.
Well, it's mainlining everything. It's kind of nice,
Well,
just for.
It's all the same interface.
Yeah.
It's all the same data set. The back-end data all works together because it's all from one database, kind of a thing, right? You've got your reporting environment. Reports are huge in business, all one universe of reporting, as opposed to the other way of approaching business, which is you've got your HR system you buy from this vendor, you got your finance system you buy from that vendor, your training, logistics stuff, all from different vendors. But then you find you need to exchange information. So now you've got to hire a whole crew of guys.
Plus, if something happens to any one of those respective companies,
they just don't want a handshake. Their data sets are set up differently. So you got guys writing stuff to translate this data into that format.
It does seem like kind of a nightmare.
Yeah, and even for your internal people. So you got somebody who's working as an HR administrator, and she learns this system. Now she transfers to finance. Well, she's got to learn a whole new interface.
Yeah, that's true.
So this is the two kind of approaches. And anyway, SAP was like, and probably still is, the biggest ERP in the world. It's German originally, and there are competitors to it, but it's really, even today, it's like huge. It's really
so, because most people in Ottawa are familiar with Nortel to some degree, I assume, was it like a cross-country thing, though? Did they have other Nortels in other cities, or was it just Ottawa-based?
Oh my God, they were around the world.
Okay. Oh, okay.
They're like 72 countries or something like that.
Okay, so then the question I want to know is, like, what happened? Because everybody knows Nortel kind of imploded. And I remember there was a trickle effect, because as a kid, I remember having, I mentioned this to you the other day, I had friends who had parents who also worked at Nortel, and I remember a lot of my friends' parents getting fired and me being afraid that would happen to you, but you kept making the cut and sort of persevering. So what's the story behind there? Like, I mean, maybe this is already in the news. I just don't personally know. What happened? Like, was it a bunch of people at the top, like, stealing money or something like that? Or was it just...
So... I don't know that I'm the person to...
Even if you're not telling it here, you know.
That's all I can do, because it's extremely complex. It's not. I don't even think all the story's really out. And then there's perspectives of what you would hear.
But some shady shit, though?
I do think...
Bailouts and shit?
I think some of the leadership made some bad decisions about... Like, I don't know a lot about accounting. But there's a thing called Generally Accepted Accounting Practice, GAAP, right? And
I love those acronyms.
Yeah, well, so you'd think that accounting is like one set of rules that everybody follows, right? But you got that generally accepted accounting.
Yeah, that seems weird. We're using math.
Well, it's just like there's some flexible areas, let's call it, right? Like when you're doing sales, we'll put these sales figures, we'll move this part of the sales into this quarter, but we'll push these sales out to there. And it might be because, that's when we're going to deliver or that. But there's some movement that happens there that sometimes shouldn't
Sounds
happen.
like shadiness.
Yeah, a little bit of shadiness, and you have to be careful with that. But the story of Nortel's, it's not that simple, right? Like, what happened was in the year 2000 was like sort of the peak of the boom. Nortel was just like doing super great. They had made what John Roth, who was one of the CEOs, had said was, the hard right-hand turn. John Roth, he was an interesting guy. he used to work on antique cars, right, restoring cars.
Okay.
And the story that I heard was that he was working on this Jaguar or something like that, and it had a wood-lined glove box, right, somewhere. And the one that in his model was all rotted away, and he needed to get another one. But this was like a X-year-old car.
Yeah, not easy to find.
He goes, how the heck am I gonna? But he did something. He went on the internet, which was kind of pretty early days of the internet then. There, the early '90s, mid '90s kind of thing. But he found like a chat group or whatever, and he said, hey, guys, I'm looking for it.
Yeah, nowadays you could probably find it pretty
Nowadays
easy.
you go on
Yeah,
Amazon,
go on
probably
eBay
order.
or something. Yeah,
That's right. But back then it was like some chat group or whatever, and he said, look, I'm looking for this, and it was some auto group or whatever, and some guy says, oh, here I am, I'm in the UK and
I've got an
Northern
extra.
England. I've got one of those out in the back. I can
Yeah.
get that for you. And so John Roth sourced this thing that he thought was going to be inconceivably hard to find if he could ever find exactly what he needed. And that got him thinking just generally about the internet and where it was going and all that. And it was this whole switch that was happening and anyway, making this hard right turn. I forget even now, it's to a particular type of technology, but he made the company make this change in direction, which was exactly the right thing to do at exactly the right time. And I think he was a successful CEO that way. He really did good.
So yeah, that sounds like the opposite of what I was asking you.
But notice the timing there, right? That's
Because 2000 you said, right?
It was mid-90s, and then so all the way through the end part of the 90s was pretty good.
Okay.
You always had these waves. There was always some kind of layoffs going on at Nortel, but it was sort of like...
Well, they sent you to like the Winter Olympics at one time, I remember.
That was Monster.
Oh, that was Monster. Oh, okay,
that
okay.
was in 2004
4 maybe?
I think.
2000 yeah, 2000.
Salt Lake Olympics.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was pretty cool. But no, with Nortel there were always layoffs because it was like the Jack Welch from GE School of Management, right? Like every year you should get rid of the bottom 10%. You just identify the bottom 10% of performers.
The underperformers,
and say,
yeah.
You're gone. You're just not good enough.
You suck, Jenny,
Yeah,
or
that's
whoever it is.
right? So with Nortel, it was more like there were so many different technologies going on, and this is a great technology right now. It's booming, great, higher. This technology here, it's kind of mature, it's phasing out, and one day they go, we're pulling the plug. And so you 500 engineers or whatever, you've got like 30 days to find another job inside of Nortel, or you're gone.
Damn.
So you'd always be getting that kind of stuff going on.
Yeah.
But that was just regular business. But in sort of like about November of 2000, the internet bubble popped. All these first internet wave of companies that had been just growing without any real
Like
growth.
Yahoo.
Yeah, well, I don't know. So many different
So
ones at
many,
the
yeah.
time. It just went pop, and there's this big collapse, and sort of everybody's running for cover all of a sudden, right? And that happened in telecom as well. And that hurt us, but then we had this like slow death because from 2000 on, it was just series of continual layoffs. And these are the things that it was.
It's got to be great for morale.
No, very tough.
Well, I was being sarcastic. Yeah.
Very tough to live through, because I'm sitting here, I'm working.
You always feel like there's somebody like...
Yeah, I'm in HR, working on HR systems, so I'm not part of the main part of the business, right? I'm part of the support part of the business, the administrative services. But, it was, as the business shrinks, then they lay off in administration as well. So I think I
Did you have to fire a bunch of people?
I didn't have to fire a bunch of people, no.
Have you ever had to fire someone?
I've had to let people go, yeah, but not too often.
I love how it shifts the terminology. Like you have to fire someone or like let people go.
The reason
Yeah.
I say it like that, I think myself.
Just send them
just
on a
is-
new path.
When I think of firing, I think it's because somebody wasn't doing their job well, or there's a reason to fire them. Letting them go.
Fair
means,
enough.
you
Yeah,
know
it
what?
sounds very vicious.
Yeah, letting them go to me this is nothing about you.
Yeah.
This is the business is letting you down, and we just can't afford you anymore, so we have to let you go. And one thing I'll say about Nortel for a long time, people who are being let go, man, they were getting great handshakes, right? I mean, years worth of salary, all this kind of stuff, and they had lots of elbow-
Compensation sort of.
But you know what's funny about layoffs, and it struck me at the time, because what they did with the first waves of layoffs was they did do the bottom 10s and stuff. They let their weakest players go. They got great handshakes, and most of them, the general economy was still good enough, they'd walk into other jobs. So they got a year's worth of salary, and 2 weeks later they're working someplace else at
So they did all
probably
right.
similar
Yeah.
monies. They did great.
And that's the bottom 10.
So you kept your best people to the very, very end.
And then they got.
And at the very, very end, they were in bankruptcy protection. Not only you were getting zero handshake, and you weren't even getting severance pay, because in bankruptcy protection, companies don't have to pay severance.
That's messed up.
It is messed up. And
So the worst workers got the
yeah,
best
and
deal.
in fact, you're trying to get just what they owe you in pension, right? Like, 'cause
Yeah.
your pension's supposed to go someplace else, but pension funds, companies tend to lag topping them up, and the next thing you know, you get let go, and you'd say, okay, we owe you $150,000 in pension, but we don't have it, so we'll give you 80. And you go, whoa, that's no good. That's like 50% of what you owe me or whatever. And
This makes me think of that movie, Fun with Dick and Jane, with Jim Carrey who's the David Duchovny's ex-wife, Téa Leoni, and Alec Baldwin is the
that's
douchebag boss.
that's the remake.
That's the remake. That's the one I saw.
I remember the original.
But the remake was like a company like this, and the rich guys took all the money and ran, kind of thing, and then they had to start like robbing Starbucks and stuff just to
So
get
there's some of
by.
that. So at Nortel, in my mind, you had your best people at the end, your best people, and
They tried
and
super hard.
They were getting zip compared to the low performers who did great getting out early. You know,
Part of that's just happenstance, though,
Yeah,
because
it's luck
nobody
of the-
knew like that the
luck of
ship
the
was
draw.
going down back then.
well, there were indicators, but this is so when you get into like being,
Yeah, but if there's a leak in the boat, like a little bit of water, that's a lot different than when the boat's like half capsized. You know what I mean? People
well,
react very
the other
differently.
thing too is that like the captain of the boat keep telling you that everything's okay.
Well, that's the wrong part. Yeah.
Well, yeah, and we would get those messages internally. They'd say, "Look, things are a little rocky right now, but we see great things on the horizon. We got all this stuff happening.
We just
so
trimmed some fat.
raw. You know, like we're good." And you want to believe it, right? Because you want this place to succeed.
Yeah.
You want to,
Especially if you invested a bunch of time there already.
well, yeah, that's
Yeah.
right. Yeah. So anyway, but things weren't okay, and things were getting worse year after year, and layoff round after layoff round.
And when did they completely like the end?
2009.
Oh wow, that long. I thought it was much earlier.
Yeah, 2009 was when I left, and I say left, I wasn't laid off, right? I was, I had survived like about 8 rounds of layoffs from
Jeez.
2000.
How are you not just like living anxiety of
There
getting
was-
fired all the time?
There was a lot of anxiety.
Yeah.
It really was. But I said it to your mom. I came home from work one day and I just said, look, this is going to die.
It's gonna get worse before it gets any better.
They were in official bankruptcy protection. I said, they're not coming out. Like this, my feeling was it was going to die. So the question was, how long would it take to die? You know, because I still had my job there. Nobody said anything about me leaving. They liked what I was doing.
You still thought you were gonna get a pension and all that at that point?
Well, yeah, I didn't know that my pension
Was
money
on the
was in
line.
any jeopardy
Yeah.
necessarily. It's a separate fund, right? I didn't know that it wasn't being topped up right to the top. So,
Mm.
but so I said, I think I need to start looking for another job, because what I didn't want to have happen was, because what was happening to people was it'd be Friday at like 3:00, and your
The
manager
rug ripped out from
would
under you.
come and tap you on the shoulder and say, "Look, I'm sorry to tell you, it's your last day. So at the end of today, like clean out your desk and you're gone."
Surprised they never had anybody go postal.
Oh,
You know what I
wouldn't
mean?
be surprised there weren't a few, but anyway.
Well, nothing that made the news. I mean,
Yeah,
like,
but this is what I'm seeing, right? And you see like Gary's gone on Friday. He's just,
Jesus,
he's
that's
not
so
back on
depressing.
Monday, right?
and then you
And
got to
feel
call
for
Gary on the weekend. Yeah,
Yeah, Gary has no money. Right? Gary has mortgage.
Has
Gary,
kids.
Gary's got 3 kids
Yeah.
or whatever, right? So I said to Mom, I said, look, I don't want to wait for this to happen, so I better start looking. So I did start looking, and I looked at several places, but one of the places was NRC, which I used to work at. But now it was a different, and what it was I was talking to one, because I had stayed in touch with several people at NRC, even though I was 18 years at Nortel, right?
that's crazy.
Yeah, so I was talking with one of them, and she said, well, what have you been doing? And I told her I was working with SAP on HR, and she said, we use SAP here.
Yeah, that's
I
one
didn't-
good thing about it
I
being the
didn't
most
know that.
popular one. Yeah.
Yeah, so she said, why don't you send an email? And she gave me the name of the VP of HR. So I sent a cold email to the VP of HR, said, hi, like, my name is Brian Reilly. You don't know me, but I used to work at NRC, blah, blah, blah.
That's cool.
This is what I've been doing, and I understand you guys use this. I'm just asking in case you might have a need for somebody who knows SAP HR. And she wrote back like the next day, said, very interested in meeting you. Like, I'd like to set something up. And I went in, long story short, had a couple of chats with people. Next thing I knew, I had a job offer.
So you kind of found like an eject button from the the bad situation you were in.
The bad
Yeah.
situation at Nortel. The interesting thing too is that at the same time, a headhunter had approached me about a job working for. It's not for D&D proper, but an ancillary agency of D&D, which looked after D&D personnel.
I should say Department of National Defense for people who might not know.
Oh, yeah, sorry. And anyway, so I had progressed in that, and I had gone like.
Well, sorry, just in this basement, I could have been talking about Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah.
Anyway.
So I had gone for these board interviews downtown. Like, it was a pretty big deal. Like, a lot of people around, like, peppering me with questions for like 2 hours and stuff like this. But and I knew there were other candidates because the headhunter told me there were like 3 or 4 others that they were being interviewed. I was the last one to be interviewed. And when I came out of that, I remember she came over to me. She said, "How do you think you did?" And I said, "I think I did okay."
The woman who just interviewed you asked you that?
No, this is the headhunter.
Oh, okay.
Who brought me in.
Oh, okay,
They
sorry.
had hired a headhunter to find them good candidates. So she was there. She
Yeah,
wasn't
that's.
asking
I wasn't
questions.
expecting
was
she
just
would be there.
present.
Yeah.
But she came out. She said, "How do you think you did?" I said, "I think I did okay." She said, "I think you did really good." And anyway, she said, "Go sit by your phone." So I went home, and later on, she called and she said they had interviewed somebody else right before me, and they were solid on that person. They said this is the person we're going to hire.
Somewhere that guy's like, "Fuck Brian Reilly."
She said it was to the point where they said, "Do we really need to interview this Brian Reilly guy?"
Wow.
And she said, "Come on, he's here. You've made him.
Yeah.
You owe him." And they said, "Okay, we'll interview him." And she said, "That's how good you did."
That's crazy.
Yeah, it made me feel great, actually. I felt really great.
Yeah, but didn't you feel bad for the other guy that you fucked him over?
Well, I'll tell you something else. I knew the other guy.
Ooh.
Yeah,
That's
He
awkward.
was from Nortel, and he's a great guy.
And did he know you got the job, obviously, afterwards, or no?
No,
To this day, has no idea?
No.
Hopefully he doesn't see this podcast.
Yeah, I don't think he'll see this podcast.
No, probably not.
And I haven't said his name.
And you haven't stayed in touch with him?
I have.
Oh, you have?
Yeah.
Oh, good Lord.
We've gone to lunch and everything. And,
What?
and to this day, he doesn't know. Well, because we're friends.
But he's never asked you, like, "So were you working these," or like, "What did you do before you retired?" It's never come up. The fact that you would go to lunch knowing that could come up, that's balls.
I just wouldn't say that I had ever interviewed for that job. I said, "Yeah, I got a job at."
No, I know, but deep down you know. It's just.
But I'm not ever going to say it to him.
No.
No, I want him to feel he got that job on his own merits, and he did. I mean, he was a solid lock, and I don't know how I beat him because he knows a lot. He's a great
Well, he must have bounced back or
He's
whatever.
a great guy. Oh no, he had nothing to bounce back from. He's done great. He's still in the job, and he's done great with it.
I thought you got the job instead of him.
No, they offered it to me.
Oh, okay.
They offered it to me, right?
Now you understand what I was saying. Then
sorry,
I thought,
yeah,
I thought
yeah.
you had gotten the job because you did end up working at NRC at the end.
No, they called me. They offered me.
Oh,
the job,
okay.
And I said, "Look, I have to be honest with you. I'm currently talking to the NRC as well, and I'm due to speak with them.
Yeah.
And I said, I need to do this."
Oh, that's right. You were talking about some
Yeah.
other
And
company. That's right.
And she said to me, she said, "Look, I want you to go talk to NRC." She said, "Because I want you to take this job because you want it."
Yeah.
Right. And I said, "Fair enough." So I said, "I'll let you know." So anyway, I did talk to NRC. They offered me a job, and I wanted to go back to NRC. So
But that's crazy that guy got that job because you didn't take the
that's
job.
right,
Wow.
That's right. But he doesn't know anything about that.
No, and I mean, it sounds like he's still qualified, but
Oh, he was very qualified. Probably more qualified than I was, I think.
yeah, you just had the pizzazz that day or whatever.
I don't know. I had the juice working for me. Yeah.
Okay, well, that's a lot about Nortel. Jesus Christ.
You asked.
No, for sure. I did ask. It's interesting stuff too, though, because I've wondered about a lot of this growing up. But one thing I wanted to touch on that you mentioned when we were talking about how you went to university and you didn't really know what you wanted to do when you sort of began. I had written a question that kind of ties into that, which is if you could go back and, like hypothetical life where, you don't have kids maybe, or you don't, or maybe you still do, but whatever, go back to that university. What now as someone who's 65 would you want to do or pursue that is different from what you ended up doing?
So if I had my life to do over again, and I went...
Well, I guess you would, still meet mom, so I exist.
Yeah. No, all that. No, yeah. Well, I would have done one of two things. I would have either gone and done the doctorate, right? Because I was offered a PhD at Toronto. right?
Oh, yeah?
I was accepted into the PhD program.
To keep doing the parasitology?
Parasitology, that's right. Sherwin Desser was the professor at the U of T who offered me that, and I kept the official letter for years just because I said, see, I could have. But eventually I turned it down and went the other route. So I would like to try that route.
Was there anything wildly outside of any of this that, like, you know, you thought about? Like, oh,
Yep.
that'd be a great job.
Being a doctor.
Being a doctor,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah. If I had to probably to start over, then I might have tried medical school.
Yeah, it's a big commitment.
Yeah.
But, like, what discipline of medicine would you have been interested in? Like, being a surgeon? Or is that too much pressure, cutting someone
I think
open?
whenever I think about it in my head, it was just a GP.
Oh, okay.
You know, I shouldn't say it like that. Just
Yeah, not to
like,
be diminishing, yeah.
Exactly. Being a GP, which is probably one of the hardest jobs.
Because you're well-rounded in your knowledge.
Well, and you have to deal with so many different people in so many different situations. And I'd like to think I would have been good at it, but yeah, who knows?
Okay, well, I feel like I should bring up some parenting type of stuff. That was one thing I wanted to ask was, since my oldest son is now 11, we're getting to the teenage years soon.
Good luck.
Well, I was going to say, what advice do you have for me? And you can use examples of me being a shit in your life when I was younger. But
What a
like,
challenge at different times.
yeah, like what would your advice be just to the teenage years of raising children in general? I guess you never had any girls, but
Would have loved to have had a girl. Nothing against the boys.
no, for sure.
Yeah.
I always wanted a sister, so I can kind of relate to
I was
that.
so thrilled
Yeah.
when Fiona came along. Yeah.
Yeah, so now I have a daughter, so my dad gets to sort of have that experience with a
Yeah.
granddaughter. But I don't know, like, can you think of any times specifically that I really, really tested you?
I can think a lot of times where you tested.
I can
us.
think of a lot.
Yeah, you were fairly challenging. You were going through a lot of stuff, more so I would say than the other two at that stage of your life. But from a parenting perspective, the thing I think, if I had like one piece of advice to give you, it's to talk to your spouse.
Okay, I thought you and Mom talked pretty openly.
Well, that's what I mean.
Yeah, we do. Like,
well,
we do.
That's
Sorry, I should say Kelly's doing my dad's job right now,
right, yeah.
my love of my life over here. We haven't really given you a shout out, so thank you for filling in.
So, and so that's I'm glad you're doing that.
Yeah.
So you've already got the big leg up, because I think the thing that got us through some of it was that I listened to your mom and she listens to me, and we would talk stuff through, and we would work on stuff together, and we each had sort of strong suits of where one of us might play a stronger role or another, but it was always we did things in unison with agreement, saying, what are we trying to accomplish to help this kid, or to make this a better situation?
And learning from each other's perspectives is definitely helpful, because
Yeah.
there's definitely times where I felt like Mom understood where I was coming from, or, you know.
Well, you and I we were pretty fractious. I was more reactionary to things. That you and I would try to talk, but it would always seem to escalate or explode.
Yeah, I was a dramatic teenager also, and I was.
Yeah, and it was just like two males butting heads.
Yeah,
right?
that's
You know,
part of it. But I was also, to be fair, looking back, I can even recognize, especially since I have kids who are going to be teenagers soon, that I was doing a lot of things that would stress most parents out. You know, I was smoking cigarettes from the time I basically started high school. A couple months later, it was like trying weed, and then like a month later, it was like, oh, I love weed. That's my thing now, forever. And then, you know, I drank at a pretty young age. Like I experimented with a lot of things, and not to shit on that, because I'm pretty open-minded when it comes to experimenting with substances. I think there's a lot of people who could use a fucking mushroom trip and put their head on straight. You know, you'd be surprised how you can. Or whatever it may be, marijuana or whatever, you know, there's uses and needs for those things in people's lives at times. But I think the age is the key factor that I've learned looking back. And I've told my kids as such. It's like, you know, you want to try drinking, you want to try weed, especially now it's legal, do it. But wait till you're like 19, or wait till you've at least graduated high school and your brain is done developing, because there's been so much more study done on that we didn't really have, 20 years ago or whenever I was doing all that shit. So,
well, and you can try. That's a great way. Like, we always tried to be forward with information and discussion.
Yeah, you never made me feel like I couldn't come to you guys with anything.
Well, take sex, right? I mean, we were very open with you guys about sex and talking about it, but we talked about it perhaps a little more biologically. Than
Yeah, you guys were like
did.
always like the sperm goes up the fallopian tube. It was, it's not like you had like a porn talk or something, but
Yeah, but other things like I still remember the day I took like a box of a dozen condoms and basically said to you and Ben, look, like here they are, right here in the closet. So we're not saying go out and go crazy.
we're not going to count and see if how many have been used
right.
or
Well, but I'll know when it's empty and I'll fill it up again. But the key thing was be safe, keep her safe. You know,
don't have a kid.
yeah, but don't be crazy about it. Don't be irresponsible.
Yeah.
I mean, it should be meaningful. But if it gets to that stage and you're going to do it one way or the other, for God's sakes, because the last thing I wanted was one of you guys, because I know young males especially, like going into the pharmacy, buying some condoms. It's like this big thing. It's a lot easier if Dad just puts a box here and you just take what you
Well,
need.
I actually was just thinking about that yesterday because a lot of people like to shit on self-checkouts, but I was thinking like buying condoms is so
lot
much
easier.
easier for a scared 15-year-old now or whatever. You just scan the shit yourself
think
and
about that, yeah.
throw it in. Yeah, coincidentally, I was just thinking about that yesterday. Whatever it may be, maybe you have, I guess kids that age don't get hurt or hemorrhoids. I was trying to think of other embarrassing things you might need to buy at the pharmacy that now you can just do it yourself and nobody needs to be any the wiser, you know?
Well, even where the guy has to go buy sanitary pads for his wife or stuff like
Well, yeah. Who says sanitary pads?
that. I don't know. Well, what do you say?
1957.
What do you say?
Just pads. And I think most chicks like tampons. I don't know. They have those diva cups now too.
Oh,
There's. I don't know enough
I
about
don't even
that.
know what that is. So
Well, I'm not going to go into it, but you can Google it.
well,
Yeah, I don't know. So I guess teenagers, it's the first lesson is always like if you make something taboo, they're going to want to do it more.
yeah.
And that's I
Some
always
things have to be taboo to some extent because at 13 you can't drive a car, you can't do this, you can't do that, right? I mean, so
But I just wonder how much more I kept smoking cigarettes because my parents were telling me I shouldn't be. And it's stupid because now I look back and I go like, what an idiot I was. Like, why didn't I just focus on the fact that it's damaging my lungs and everybody knows smoking's bad for you? But there was some sort of an appeal to that rebellious. And like, what was I rebelling against? Like a good, like mid to upper middle class white family? Like, sometimes I honestly think that that's why I did a lot of partying and stuff in my teen years is that like, and this is going to sound like the most privileged thing ever, but that my life was so good. Like that sounds like really asshole to say, I guess, but like I had good parents. I wasn't like needing things. Usually I had a roof over my head and food and I went to a decent school and all that. So I don't want to say I was bored, but I think like a lot of the music I was into, a lot of the people that I idolized, they all had a lot more struggle and trials and tribulations coming up and through their youth and stuff. And in a lot of cases, it seemed like it defined them. And then I wanted to be like those people. I wanted to have something edgy about me, some struggle that I had to overcome that was mine, and obviously that wasn't necessarily the wisest decision, but I've spent a lot of time thinking about it, like why did
I think you did have some struggles too, like the OCD. And
Yeah, I've had obviously mental health issues that have sort of progressed as I've gotten older, I guess is the easiest way to say it, because I've had indications of obsessive compulsive disorder since I was like grade 4. About 10 years old was the first time I have memories.
I used to shut all things and
Yeah, I always still shut cupboards and, even still, I check the goddamn oven like 3 times that the elements aren't on before I go to bed. Like certain things like that are pretty hard to shake, but I also have never burned my house down. So I guess there's something to be taken away from that.
I wish some of that shutting stuff would rub off on your mom. She always leaves cupboard doors and drawers. I'm always banging my heads because she doesn't shut anything. And I've been telling her for years, can't you just shut I'm busy. I'm making stuff, and
It's funny. I feel like I'm turning into you most of the time now that I have kids because every goddamn day I'm like, who left these fucking lights on? Like every day. Oh my God. And anytime it's possible, it seems to happen. But, that's just part of being a dad, I guess. It's like, who touched the thermostat? That whole.
And some of these things too will always be this way because it's the young person going through the change of becoming their own person, becoming independent. They have to rebel to some degree and things like that. And
It helps define you.
and parents are trying to keep them safe and keep them in a bubble to some degree, while they slowly expose them to the world. And so these things are always kind of a little bit at loggerheads. And all you can do is, first of all you can do is your best, right? Every parent is new to the job, right? Like they've never done this before, so they have to learn. There's always no shortage of conflicting advice out there, right?
That's true.
The older generation trying to tell you what was you should do
But
it
this
this
is
way.
how we
'cause
used to
this
do
is
it.
how we used
Get
to
the
do it.
belt.
That's right, yeah. And then you've got friends telling you you're doing this way. And anyways, everyone figures out for themselves. But I think there are still some foundation blocks, and one of the big ones is communication. And it sounds like you're doing a good job on that already with your kids. So
Oh yeah, I mean,
you got to talk. If you
I
don't
think
talk, you're
censorship is usually a detriment. I mean, within reason. Obviously, I'm not going to show extremely graphic content to my children
Violence or
of people dying or like sex stuff or whatever. But talking about stuff for sure. I don't try to sugarcoat. Like if something's on the news, I'm not going to try and rephrase it for their little baby ears. It's like, some degree, this is the world you're living in. Like you're going to figure it out sooner or later. You got to do it in increments, but.
So here's where I might disagree with you just a little bit, though. So, like, I agree in being open and talking things through and stuff, but you got to be a little careful how you talk about some stuff because you don't want to scare the crap out of your kids as they're forming.
Yeah.
Like, let them know, like, you may as well give up because the world's fucked.
Well,
You know
no,
what I mean? Yeah.
we never try to do that. No, I just mean more.
But you got to watch for that because kids, their little brains will start working, right? Climate change, the Earth's going to burn up. This disease is going to kill us all. This is, all these different things. And
It's pretty intense, yeah.
Yeah, it's hard on them. Yeah.
Well, that's why at the same time we
hard on
always
us.
try to build a foundation of like love and understanding and all that to counterbalance the fucked up world. Give them a home base that at least feels normal and try to train your kids to make good relationships and ask questions. And that's one thing I've always tried to tell my children is just to always ask questions and be willing to listen as well to other people's perspectives and always try to keep learning and always try to keep growing. That's the best you can really do. Adults should do that, honestly. Like, should never really stop that. I'm trying to look at my list of stuff here. I have a few, couple more things. Well, one thing I was going to talk about was podcasting stuff. Where do you think we're headed in the future? I know we've talked about some things that we're going to get you a microphone. Ideally, one day we should have a camera that we could switch to yourself if you're talking. But one thing I actually wanted to ask, sort of Strombo being on the show, is what guest would you want on our show if you could pick anyone for me to interview and you to sit idly by and interject when you feel appropriate? Only because I remember we talked about Strombo like a week or two before that shit happened, and you were like, oh, George Stroumboulopoulos, that would be great to get him. I would love to pick his brain or something like that. And then that shit happened, and it was like, so that's kind of where I got this question from, is if the stars were to align again, I don't know. I guess I could say living or dead, but let's stick with living. Let's be realistic, because I know you might pick like Leonard Cohen or one of these.
Oh, man.
Right? I know you.
I would have loved to talk to Leonard Cohen.
But let's say the living, just to keep it in the realm of realism here.
So this is a little out of left field, and maybe it's just because he's in my head right now because I've seen him recently. But I would really like to spend some in-depth time talking with Keanu Reeves.
Seems like a good guy, and his life has been insane from what I've read.
Well, and I don't want to give him a big head, but he's said some things that are almost profound, right? Like, and don't ask me what they are right now, but there was.
Did you know about his life as well and the things he's gone through?
I know about a wife that died early on.
After having a miscarriage.
Oh, okay.
And there's something in his childhood, I believe, too. It was just thing after thing. I remember reading his life and just going like, wow, this guy kept getting kicked when he was down, and he keeps being this positive dude and he rides the subway still like a normal person.
And he does nice things for people. Like this is the thing. Whenever you hear a story about Keanu,
it's always
like
positive.
One time when some plane got delayed or the weather kicked it out, but everyone needed to get into New York and they were like 100 miles away, and he said, well, let's rent this van, and he just got 6 other random passengers who wanted to go in on it with him, and off they headed, and he got his music device out and played some of the songs he liked.
He seems like he kind of has a hippie's heart,
Well, yeah, it's like he's not hung up on the whole stardom thing. And
materialistic bullshit.
This is what it seems, right?
Yeah, from what I've heard, I get the same vibe.
They come across. The stories are all like individuals who come across him in some happenstance way. Like one was at a picture where a guy was in his car and Keanu pulls up on a motorcycle next to him, and it's like, hey, Keanu, and he's like, hey, and they have like a moment. He takes the picture and all that kind of stuff. And
yeah, you never hear a bad story about him, really.
I've never heard like a bad story about this guy.
Yeah.
And I would just like to know like how he gets sort of this Zen approach to everything.
Yeah, I imagine he meditates a lot, or he's just had some sort of amazing therapist or something.
Yeah.
Did you see?
I just like the guy.
They just, it's a good pick. I wasn't expecting that, but I would love to interview him. Not that I expect it to happen, but that'd be cool. One day, you never know. Did you see there's a new trailer for Bill and Ted 3?
Yeah, I gotta say, I wasn't that impressed by it.
It looked all right.
Yeah.
To be fair, I don't know if this is against my geek cred, but I may have seen the original two when I was really young.
Yeah.
Like when they were first coming out and I was like 7 at my friend's house or something.
Watch it again, of course.
Yeah, I think I'm going to revisit them because I know a lot of friends that love those movies.
He's doing Matrix 4 too, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and he said it was the Wachowskis wrote, because someone said, like, why did you do this? And he said, because they wrote a beautiful script. And I read it and I said, yeah.
Oh, for the new one.
Yeah.
Okay, because I was going to say, I remember hating the third one.
Yeah. It was Lana Wachowski, I think, is the one who wrote the script. And
Yeah, one of them had a sex reassignment surgery, right?
both have now.
Oh, they both have.
Yeah,
Interesting.
It's so funny. There was the Wachowski brothers. Now it's the Wachowski sisters.
Hey,
Yeah.
whatever makes you happy.
Whatever works.
Yeah, that's, I mean, if they got the money to do it, I guess you got to pay for that down in the States, I would assume, right?
Well,
Everything,
I
yeah.
don't think money's their issue. Yeah.
No, I'm saying, like, at least they have the ability to do that,
Yeah.
Okay, well, that actually ties into two things, because this was kind of where I was going to take a turn and go really geeky to kind of, wrap it up eventually. But since you mentioned The Matrix, there was another question I had kind of before that stuff, which was, you're basically an atheist, I've gathered, for the most part. Like, mom's kind of infected you with her spiritual stuff and makes, I think, open your mind a little bit more. But I've heard a pretty strong atheist vibe from you. But the real question I was going to ask is, do you believe in the simulation theory? Do you think that's very plausible? Or, like Elon Musk says, like, we're all living in the Matrix, essentially, that kind of thing? Or do you think that's just kind of bullshit?
I think that's bullshit. I mean, that particular theory does not appeal to me.
Yeah.
And actually, for most of my life, I've not called myself an atheist.
Or you're agnostic?
Agnostic is usually what I...
That's usually what I call myself. That just means you're open to the possibility of a God?
Well,
or?
it's I don't have any proof that there's not a God.
Oh. Well, neither do atheists, right? Or they would argue that they do?
They would argue that they do.
By the absence of it?
Yeah.
Okay.
But I think an agnostic is someone who says, look, I don't prove to know or not know.
Yeah. The universe is a complicated place.
I'm open if some evidence presents itself that's sort of incontrovertible evidence.
Yeah.
As opposed to somebody said, oh, I had a dream, or that kind of
Yeah,
stuff. Then I'd say, well, okay, but...
And I guess the older you get, the more hopeful, I would think.
Well, funny, I'm more the other way. The older
really?
I get, the more I'm drifting to sort of the atheist side. I mean, you listen to somebody like Ricky Gervais talk about it, even as part of a routine. I mean, he's making his points, and you go, yeah, it just...
Yeah, I've heard some of his
just
stuff.
reinforces what I'm thinking anyway, I mean...
You're very science-brained, though, I think that
yeah.
walk of sort of faith, or whatever you want to call it, spirituality, that appeals to you, because that's how your brain works, You want to have logic behind those...
Yeah. It's everybody's different. Like, there are a lot of scientists who go to church, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, these guys who deal with cold logic and hard facts, and yet they believe that there's a God up there watching us or whatever. And of course, everyone explains God in their different ways, right? I mean,
or they say it's science we don't understand yet, or we could never understand because it's divine science. Or
and Ricky Gervais, he'll talk about the hundreds or thousands of gods that have been, right, or that there are, and what makes your God the right God.
Yeah,
I think that's what he really objects to, even is
the division of religions.
Yeah, there are these people who seem to feel, well, if you're not Christian, don't believe like the Jesus Christ God, and all that, then you're a heathen and you're going to burn in hell. And so, well, come on, like, if you're born in India or you're born in China, you were never exposed to this.
Yeah, that's not even fair.
It's just not even fair.
Like, Jesus is just like, screw them. Yeah, no, that's not.
So there's that kind of a thing. But then there's just the pure, it just doesn't make sense. But on the other hand, there are other things I just don't understand either. I mean, we go back to the Big Bang and that there's this infinitesimally small something that one day explodes
and makes everything.
And within like a couple of seconds, the universe is birthed. All this matter and energy and all this. And you go, well, hang on.
What was that thing?
What was that? Where did that come from?
Yeah, exactly.
And no one's got the answer for that, I don't believe. I mean, they'll tell you, well, there's a theory that this is a pinhole from another universe and all this spewed out from some other.
But where was that universe? And like,
Exactly.
you're just gonna keep going down that rabbit hole.
Exactly. Where did everything come from?
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at.
I mean, I'm okay with life as being just a random bunch of things that happen chemically, that came and developed over time through evolution.
Like you're not someone who
complex
subscribes to
organisms that we're
destiny
now.
or whatever.
No.
But you still can't.
But even if there wasn't life and it was just an empty, cold universe,
Yeah.
no life in it, still, where the fuck did it all come
Yeah.
from? I don't know.
What's the point, too, is another
It's
valid
just-
question.
It just bends our
What's the
brains.
point?
Well,
Well, it's even more
there's no
confused.
point, probably.
Yeah, I don't know, but like, especially when humans become involved in the amazing things that happen or the tragic things that happen and the way that we interpret those things and are able to feel those things, all of that, like, what's the point of all that? It just seems so, like, that's a part of atheism that really bothers me, is it kind of, it makes all those important things you thought were so important and valued and the loved connections you have with other people and all that seem, it's like shitting on that and being like, that's nothing when you die. It's all fucking nothing.
If you take
It was never for anything
if
at
you
all.
take it from the perspective that life is just this thing that happened. Let's go with that for a second.
Yeah.
It's we had the primordial soup and bacteria, blah blah.
It's
blah,
all
blah,
just-
evolution, and some of us gain sentience and the ability to start controlling our environment and start to relating to each other and all that, and that's what it is. So all you can do with that is do the best you can with it. Have a good life, be kind to others,
Yeah.
try to learn, try to develop.
Try to live in the moment.
This is it.
Yeah.
If you're someone like me, I think this is it. When I die, I'm gone. I don't. This is where I differ from Mom, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's like fade to black.
You think your energy and your molecules may be redistributed, and
Well, they are redistributed.
Well, yeah, they turn into something else eventually.
Yeah, either worm food or you burn me.
But
up.
what happens to the consciousness, the
Elemental.
pilot within your being?
I think it's gone.
Well, I've heard the argument that some people think that. Oh, I'm gonna fuck this up. I think some people think that we're like in an experience that when you die, it's like you're a TV set and the TV set's just broken. But then other people think that the frequency, it's more like a radio signal, and that the conduit stops working, but the signal carries on. And that's you, your soul, whatever it is,
Yeah.
And that right now your frequency, your soul, is just tuned into this unit. But that where does that signal go just because the unit stops working? You know what I mean? Like a radio signal doesn't disappear just because you smash the radio. It's still out there.
Well, the radio signal is propagating out through space, sure, and getting more diffused.
I don't know. It's probably like a
Yeah.
nutshell, sort of like.
It's not.
I said I was
not-
going to butcher this,
It's
but
not generating anything new, right? I mean, as soon as the set's broken, it's not generating anything.
no. But if my point being that if you were to get another radio and tune to that same frequency, the frequency is still there.
Oh, so
That's obviously the frequency's coming from a radio tower. Like you have to take it with a grain of salt for a metaphor.
But we are the radio
Signal, yeah,
generation. We generate the signal, and when you kill this, you kill the source of the
Well,
signal.
that's the other. So you're kind of explaining it better than I did. That's the other argument with the once it's broken, it's done.
Yeah.
The signal's coming from this unit, and when the unit dies, the signal dies. But other people,
See, people will say, well, it's all energy, man.
Yeah.
That kind of a thing, right? And you just transform from this energy into another kind of energy. You go from this plane.
well, and we're all
existence
made up
to
of
a
stars. We all
higher
come from
level.
stars.
Well,
People always
we
say.
are all stardust. That part I agree with.
That's cool.
That's logical. But stardust is not sentient.
Mm.
So I just have a hard time believing there's this ethereal plane that our souls or our
Your consciousness.
consciousness just moves to this next thing. It's a nice story we tell each other to help us deal with the grips of death, right? I mean,
Well, and I think it's another way you can look at it is if you're so okay, if you and Mom got together, the genetic part, I was supposed to look like this and develop, and I could have made life choices to eat more food or have a bad diet and maybe I'd be bigger, or I could, there's things that could factor in, but generally speaking, my DNA, my genes, this was the unit that you guys were going to make at that time, right? So, but you can take the mindset of like, okay, but what about like the person thinking inside? Why is it me as opposed to someone else's soul? Like, you know what I mean? Like, what if you had made the same person, but it's not me? Like, the inner voice you hear, like it's somebody else was in here, like you, or that's a bad example, but you know what I mean?
yeah, but your inner voice is something that develops with you as you develop.
Yeah.
From this combination of things. Like, for instance, if I was born like my father and I had a deformity, right? That would change who I was probably as an adult then from who I am today because I had two normal.
But what about the things like we talked about earlier that seem to be innately a part of you that weren't learned, and they're just like, oh, this guy, yeah, he just really loves classical music, and the first time he heard it, he was just kicking in his crib and or whatever it may be. That's just an example, but
and
nature versus nurture to a degree, you know.
And that's really interesting, and that stuff's fun to study because you're right. I mean, you can see like a grandfather who's able to just draw brilliantly, right?
Yeah.
And they might have like 3 kids and they can't draw worth shit.
Exactly.
And then they have a grandkid who just draws wonderfully. Just like you go gets that from his grandpa.
Yeah, exactly. But that could still be argued to be genetics then, yeah.
Well, this is what I mean. I do think there is something to some innate skills and things like that having a genetic basis.
I had thought that there was. I had heard.
Isn't that epigenetics? Isn't there? There's a thing called epigenetics where you, when you get your genes analyzed, you find out you have genes for certain things that you may not have been aware of, right? And they say, actually, your genes are saying that if you do this, you're going to
be really good. Oh,
good
interesting.
at it or able to develop that. It's called epigenetics, where you learn about your genes and you learn how to express those genes. So you might never have gone swimming, just for argument's sake, right? But then you look at your genes and say, well, you've got a really strong swimmer's gene here, have you ever really pursued that? You say, well, no, I never have, but I will now.
Yeah.
And you go out, you go, hey, I'm fucking good at this.
And then you're like, why didn't someone tell me this when I was like 10?
Yeah, right. And there's guys who are studying this whole thing because you can use it not only to express genes for talents like that, but you can use it for health. Like you look at your genes, you say, well, this is a weak respiratory system. So you need to really focus on developing that because it's innately weak by your genes. So express what you can to make yourself stronger aerobically, for instance, or something like that. Or, this is all that kind of stuff, this is a nascent field, right? It's pretty young.
Something that's still being
developed
understood, yeah.
Well, the whole understanding of genome is still, we mapped it, back in like 2002 or something?
Yeah, I just watched a mini documentary on Netflix about that.
Yeah, we don't understand it yet.
I had heard, I don't know if this is true or not, but have there not been instances of people who got, I think the example I heard was like a man, I don't know the specifics about the man, but he got a transplant and the heart was from like an Asian woman. And then after the transplant had like crazy cravings for certain cuisine that he had never wanted in his life that apparently she loved or whatever, stuff like that. I don't know, maybe I'm pulling that out of my ass.
I never heard that story, but that's interesting. But,
yeah. Okay, well, damn, I thought you might have.
No. But I do think there's something to the whole genes part, as well. So, yeah, the nature versus nurture.
Yeah.
That's a real thing, yeah.
It's weird because you don't get a do-over, right? Like, you can't take a baby, let him live his life one way, and then go back 10 years, and then, we're going to take him this way. Will he still love piano either way, even if we don't expose him to it? Or, and then that would maybe be an argument for the soul or the genetic thing, but... okay, well, like I said, we probably got to wrap up. I know Kelly has to work tomorrow. So I want to switch it over to nerdiness just to end things here. So first of all, I should mention my dad has a crazy comic book collection. Like, how many comics do you have now?
Over 10,000.
Over 10,000 comic books. But you started collecting comics at a really young age, I believe. I remember it stuck with me when I got into comics. You told me a story that when you went to college, your mom, my grandma, threw a bunch of comics that would have been like some of the first issues of X-Men, stuff that would have been worth some real money.
So I was born in 55.
Yeah. So the boom in Marvel was like early 60s with all those titles, 63, 64.
Marvel was just getting going, really, I think. And when I first started reading comics, I was probably like, 7 years old, something like that.
62. So, that's about right when they started kicking off.
And I just loved them. So, I mean, I love books of all kinds. I read like a fiend when I was a kid, but I love comic books.
And science fiction, too.
Yeah, science fiction I love. But superheroes and stuff, love them, And I read comics, and I had, a lot of comics, like a box full of comics, But were they in great shape?
Exactly. They might have had tape on the cover or something.
But I wasn't hard on them either, right? But it was the days pre-collecting.
You didn't have like little sleeves you put them in and stuff back then?
No. But I'll tell you something. I had a friend, Paul, and Paul had an older brother, John. He was like 3 years ahead of us. And I remember when I was in high school, because that's where I met Paul, going to his house one day, and we were talking comics or something. He said, "You really like comics, don't you?" And I said, "Yeah, I've always liked them, And he said, "Let me show you something." And we went into his brother's bedroom, which was a little risky because we were. He was one
Oh,
of
you
those
guys
guys that-
snuck into his older brothers?
yeah.
Huh.
And Paul reached under his bed and he started pulling out these comic long boxes. I'd never seen a comic long box before.
Oh.
And they were full of comics. They were all bagged and boarded.
Oh, so that community did exist to some
Well,
degree.
this is now we're talking 1971-ish.
Okay, yeah.
Like this. But he was ahead of his time.
For
this
sure.
guy was a bona fide collector. He had hundreds of comics. And they went right from like early 60s, maybe even late 50s.
You think he still has them?
Oh, I'm sure he does. Yeah.
Well, he might have sold them. You don't know what happened to his
oh,
life.
maybe, like
Maybe he
John-
went bankrupt or
John
something.
would probably be 70 years old now. I mean, I haven't seen the guy in.
I could see a 70-year-old guy being like, "Hey, I'm gonna finally sell these and get
Yeah,
that
yeah. And
yacht or whatever."
And his would be worth money. So the thing with my mom was, so I had a box of some of my favorite comics or whatever, and I went away to university. And to be fair, I didn't say anything special.
It's not like
about
she
them.
knew. Yeah.
Yeah. And one day I came back and home at Christmas or whatever. I thought, I'll go look at and they weren't there. And I said, like, where are my comics? And Brian, you're too old for comics.
Oh,
Just got rid of all those comics.
Grandma, rest in soul. God, how did you do that?
And when I got sucked back into comics, because I didn't do anything with them for a long time, was when Ben was born. Your brother, of course, for people out there. So that when was he born? 83.
Yeah.
And I had him in a stroller, and I was walking through some store, and I saw one of these rotating stands of comics, and it had like a brand new Superman, a brand new Flash, or something like that, starting at issue number 1. And I said, how can that be issue number 1? This is when they started doing all the retakes.
Yeah. Something they've done many
So
times
I don't
now.
know why. I picked up, I bought it, took it home, I read it, and then I went and I watched. I bought number 2 and then number 3, and then I picked up another title, and away we went.
And you just started.
Yeah, and I went with the classics, things that I'd grown up with, right?
I was gonna say because you've always been heavy DC over Marvel.
Yeah, although I read Marvel when I was a kid too. Honestly, the DC Marvel thing isn't because I like DC more than Marvel. It's I only have so much money.
Yeah, but you had to make a choice to pick DC at one point.
Yeah,
You-
but I still collect Spider-Man.
yeah, that's true. You had a couple titles
I've
from
got
Marvel that you
Amazing
stuck with.
Spider-Man. I had a couple of others, or I still collect Thor.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I got a ton of Thor comics. So there are certain ones that I still have, but yeah, Batman, Superman, Green Lantern, Flash.
They're older characters as well. Yeah.
Yeah, I never really collected Wonder Woman, but I liked her in the Justice League, and
Yeah.
like all those sorts of things. Metal Men. I used to think Metal Men were so
Metal
cool.
Man. Well, that's
Yeah.
sciencey. You're such a
robots.
science
All
nerd.
these robot guys. Yeah, but each one based on an element.
Well, that's super sciencey to
yeah.
be thinking that's badass or
Yeah,
whatever.
I thought Metal Men was good, and there's some.
I always like Metamorpho from DC.
Yeah, Metamorpho was cool.
The Element Man.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, he was neat.
He's a pretty cool guy. I
Yeah.
just liked his look. And
Yeah.
same with Martian Manhunter was always a
But I
fan.
knew even when I was young, I remember reading the early Spideys, and I knew Spidey, it was so different from the DC take, right? When I was reading the early Spideys and Peter, I felt like, oh, he's just like me.
Yeah, I think that's how everyone feels with Spider-Man.
But,
Yeah.
but Stan Lee, I mean, he really hit it on the nose, right?
Yeah.
He really got that hook into you. I mean, Superman was Superman. You were never going to be Superman.
See, it's weird. I love Spider-Man, and he's definitely one of my favorite for the same reasons. It's every man's hero, kind of. But I had similar feelings about the X-Men just growing up. To me, the X-Men were so cool, mainly because all you had to do was hit puberty, and you got powers. And I was like at an age where I was waiting to hit puberty.
Yeah,
and
you could be like Beast, and suddenly your hands and feet were 4 times. the
true,
normal
yeah, it
size.
wasn't always great. Oh, there's worse examples. There was a whole run they did in the early 2000s. I think it was Grant Morrison, actually, when he came on. I might be wrong on that, though. But there was a point where they started to specifically showcase kind of loser mutants to show, like... And then a lot of writers ended up retconning, or maybe not retconning, but getting rid of that later on because they felt like it got to the point where there's just too many mutants in the Marvel Universe. And that's when they had that whole decimation event that shrunk the numbers down to like a couple hundred just to kind of put everything in their place, which was funny because certain characters that actually had been long-standing characters, like the Blob, he lost his powers and then he was just a fat dude. Because Blob was pretty powerful before that. No one can move him. If you punch him, your hand gets stuck in him. He was a formidable opponent. And then
What's really interesting, I think, with X-Men and with so many of the other characters too, is to see this evolution over the decades that they've been around. Right? I remember those very, very early X-Men.
I read the first
I
40
read them
issues
as they come
online.
out. Yeah, well, I read them when they came out.
They were lame
Well, they were,
compared.
But when you were a kid back then, and it's the first iteration, you're seeing you got a guy with wings that can fly.
None of this had been
You
done,
got
yeah.
an Iceman in there.
Yeah.
I mean, holy shit, this is incredible stuff. But you see what they've done with it in the universe, and you see the way they rendered things today. It's just like so different.
Yeah, well, I
And
haven't.
and then to see them rendered on the screen.
Well, that's actually another question. Because I was gonna say I shouldn't say they were lame, but compared to the comics I was reading at the time, I did find it kind of hard to get through those really old issues. Mainly, this is maybe make me sound like a dunce, but there's just so much more text heavy in the older comics. They would have every panel would have a big fucking square with like a paragraph or more. And I don't hate reading, but like what I like about more modern comics is you still get that. You still get a lot of story, but there's a lot more showcasing of art and art to sort of art that makes you feel that kinetic movement of what's happening. They really nailed that. Some of the artists that people shit on, like what's his name? Rob Liefeld, the guy who can't draw feet. But he did a lot of kind of groundbreaking storyboarded sort of like action sequences that weren't being done at the time, and it sort of broke up the monotony of just the panel old school.
You still get some interesting things. Like there's a new run of Legion of Superheroes that's just started, right? And so I've got the first 5 issues. And I was reading them this morning, and I just was at one point I went, Jesus, this is a lot of reading. Oh, yeah. And I just kind of stepped out of the individual panel and looked at the 2 pages. I went, there's a lot of friggin' text on these 2 pages.
Well, maybe they're going back to it.
Well, I hadn't seen that for a while. And that's what you get in comics. You get waves of this and that and the other thing. And as much as I collect comics and I know a lot about the characters and the development of the years, one thing I've never done that you and your brothers have more impressed me with, and you're not even into it the same way I am, is, as you say, I like this writer and that writer or this artist and that artist. I'm shit with their names. Like I go, the only artists I remember are Sears and Elliott. Bart Sears and I think it was Randy Elliott. They did Justice League Europe.
Oh, really?
And I thought
I could name some other artists, and you'd be like, oh yeah.
Oh, I know the names.
Todd McFarlane.
Sure,
come on.
Sure, yeah, absolutely. But Sears and Elliott really stood out to me with that Justice League International or Justice League Europe that they did. And it was the art was like so fantastic, especially how they drew the women. I was going, holy.
Oh, that got ridiculous in the '90s. Good Lord.
Yeah.
For me, it was John Byrne and the X-Men stuff from the 70s. I always loved his art. I have a few. Oh, yeah. So one question, if we can do this one sort of brief, because I think we are probably getting late. Sure. But you mentioned seeing them on the screen, and I wanted to ask you, what is a character that hasn't been in any capacity on screen, TV, or movies from comics that you can't wait to see come to life as a real, maybe CGI, but like in a live-action movie? And they've done a lot of characters. It's actually hard.
Well, there's some that have been done that I'd like to see redone correctly.
Okay, well, that still counts, I guess.
I mean, Green Lantern's an obvious one.
Yeah.
They really blew it with the...
And Ryan Reynolds is awesome, but it just wasn't a good fit, really.
But even he, as Deadpool, blew the brains
out. Well, a lot of it, the CGI and the mask was weird. You know what, though? I watched that with the kids, people and Kelly, too, who really didn't know shit all about Green Lantern, and... They didn't hate it. Like, it was, especially when he was training on Oa or whatever, and Kilowog was showing him how, and training with Sinestro. There was some good performances. It was just kind of a sloppy mess. And
so I'll tell you what I'd like to see, and it's not a single character. But what I'd like to see is I'd like to see a drift back into some of the Golden Age stuff and get a little more of those characters brought to the fore. And actually, until a week ago, I would say I'd never seen these characters rendered, but I saw them because there's a new series on I think it's on CW. I know because I just pull them down off the net, but it's called Stargirl.
Yeah, you talked to me about this the other day.
So episode 1, the very first one, starts off with this big fight, right? Stripesy, who was Starman's sidekick back then, who's a
terrible name,
human.
I'm going to say.
Yeah,
Stripesy.
He wore his striped shirt, right?
Yeah.
Anyway,
wow, they really thought on that one.
But he's driving up into this big fight in this mansion. He goes in, and it's the Justice Society of America. So we're talking Dr. Midnight and Hourman, the original Jay Garrick Flash, Starman, all these iconic Justice Society.
Dr. Fate,
Earth 2 Justice Society of America guys. I'd love to see someone like take all those guys and bring them.
Put them in like a feature film or something?
Yeah. God, I would love that.
That'd be kind of cool. Do it like a wartime era.
Do it set back in the 40s.
That'd be cool, actually.
Yeah.
Kind of like what they did with the first Captain America movie.
The powers are more limited, let's say, a lot of the times. I mean, Flash was still super fast,
but you don't have like Superman level characters that can do pretty much anything.
Not too many.
Yeah. Huh. Okay. Well, I did have a few. These were supposed to be fast, sort of geek questions. Okay. So give me a couple sentences, but don't go on and on.
I'll do my best. Yeah.
The first one was because I like X-Men so much. Do you have a favorite X-Men? And why, briefly?
I think I always liked Iceman. I thought he was pretty cool because, I'd seen the Torch in the Fantastic Four, and I always thought the Torch was
Human Torch is awesome, yeah.
Yeah. He was the.
So it's kind of the counterpart.
Yeah, it's the counterpart, and I thought that's pretty cool. He'd make these ice slides he'd slide around on, or.
And he came out as a gay guy in recent years.
Oh, did he?
Iceman's gay now in canon, yeah. And actually, there's a lot of evidence in the past of all his relationships that never really worked out. Like he was faking being into chicks.
Okay.
So there's actually like the writers kind of pulled from real stuff from the comics. So I got respect for that. Yeah, I mean, and X-Men's always been about people feeling accepted even though other people are telling them they're freaks or they shouldn't be there. That's I always thought the message of X-Men was so powerful because it was just like, hey, like you're one of us. It's all good. Like we welcome everyone. Although. Yeah, they took humans in once in a while. I was going to say you still have to be a mutant, but, it still had a good positive message overall. It doesn't matter if you're Nightcrawler with blue skin or if you're, whoever else. They all had their own thing going on. Okay, best Star Trek captain and why? I knew that one might be a bit of a thinker.
Oh, gosh.
I would honestly pick Kirk. I know it's not my question, but I just love...
Kirk's appealing, but was he the best captain?
As far as leading his crew and shit? Yeah, he's a little bit risky.
Yeah.
He did some bravado a lot of the times.
I'm going to go with Picard B.
Yeah?
Yeah, I always thought Picard was a pretty balanced guy.
What are the other ones? Cisco, Janeway, and the guy from Enterprise. I can't remember his name.
Oh, yeah.
Captain...
What's his name?
It's the guy from Quantum Leap.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
It's got...
and I think that series is way underrated. I really enjoyed that series.
I never watched that one.
Oh, no, it's good.
I can't remember his name.
One with Cisco. What was that one?
That was Deep Space Nine.
Oh, yeah.
And they were on the
A lot of people
space
seem to
station.
think like that was the most meaty of all of them, but I never really took to it that
I didn't like it because they were always in one place for the most part. I liked to me, Star Trek was always about exploring strange new worlds,
Have you watched the new one, though?
No, and I heard people said it's actually pretty good, but originally I heard people saying that they changed the Klingons and they don't look anything like it anymore. And
yeah, but they still look pretty good, I think.
But why the change? Do they even explain that shit?
No, it's just a different rendering. It's like you go back to Captain Kirk Klingons. Look at those guys.
Well, they didn't have any bumps on their foreheads, but
kind of greeny skin.
Ben told me that was all explained, that it was like some shitty group of Klingons that were like kind of ousted from the main Klingon Empire, and it's retconned. Yeah.
But the new Star Trek, I think, looks pretty good. I saw a couple of episodes. I have to watch more of that.
There's too much good stuff on TV.
But I thought the movies were good too.
The reboot ones, J.J. Abrams ones? Yeah, those were pretty good.
Yeah, I enjoyed all of those.
Rest in peace to Chekhov. That guy got it pretty bad.
Anton.
Yeah, crushed by his own SUV or whatever. That was
horrible. He seemed like a really nice kid.
Oh, yeah, right? He seemed like the nicest guy. Okay, well, to move on to not such a horribly tragic thing. Best sci-fi movie or book of all time? Like, kind of just don't think about it,
You got to think about it a little bit.
Well, yeah.
There's so many.
Don't overthink. It's supposed to be like a speed round,
Yeah. So the best movie, I'm just going to go with Blade Runner.
I've never seen it.
Oh,
I know.
You're kidding me.
I know. And there's a sequel now, too, like 30 years after, and I still haven't seen the original.
Okay, but the original Blade Runner blew my mind.
The Replicants. I know about it a bit, but...
So did Alien, though.
Aliens. She's never seen any of the Aliens movies.
Oh, Kelly, you have to see the Aliens. Oh, my God. When I hear things like this, I go, how could you not have seen it?
It's because new great content is always coming out, too, right?
And that's what I forget, is that I'm much older, and I saw it when they were...
Exactly. And you didn't have a million choices. It was like that was what was playing at the theater, and everyone was talking about it, so...
Yeah. The Blue Adept is a good science fiction book, or anything by Heinlein.
You used to read Piers Anthony a lot, too.
Yeah.
Lord of the Rings or Game of Thrones?
Game of Thrones.
Oh, I thought you were going to go the other way just because you grew up with it probably. And
yeah, Lord of the Rings, they were good.
And Game of Thrones, everyone hated the ending too, apparently.
The ending wasn't good, but the series was good.
Same thing as Dexter. Last season and the
Never
finale.
Saw the last season of Dexter.
I didn't because I got it spoiled and it sounded terrible.
Yeah. But I think Game of Thrones was, for me, with the better watch.
I've only seen the first 3 seasons of that.
Not that I don't respect Lord of the Rings. Like, they were good, but... I don't know.
It's more adult, really. That's probably the main appeal, right? It's like nothing had been doing it that way. It was like, let's take fantasy and make it fucking hardcore rated R.
Yeah. So spoiler, so block your ears right now if you haven't watched Game of Thrones. But when Ned Stark lost his head at the end of the first season,
I was gonna say the Red Wedding is what everybody always talks about.
That was just a shock. But when Ned lost his head, like he was like you thought
The main character.
the main
you thought, yeah.
character though it was built around.
It was a big
this guy.
psych out for
And
sure.
Yeah, and they just get rid of him. You go, okay, this is a different kind of a series.
Yeah.
You know.
But then
I
did they not kind of start doing that? Like that became the thing. Then it was like,
knocking people off.
yeah, I almost feel like they went off the deep end with that a little bit
I don't know if
afterwards.
they went off the deep end, but it showed.
No
like,
one's safe. That's like the vibe of that show. It's like someone's gonna fucking die every second episode, and it's gonna be someone you love. Deal with it.
Yeah.
Walking Dead kind of did the same thing, and Walking Dead I gave up on after a while.
It just went on too long.
It was so bleak. I was like, I don't even want. I am almost rooting for these characters to die so they can be out of their misery. Because right now they're just watching somebody get picked off in a horrible way every couple weeks, and I stopped watching for a while. I tried to get back into it, and then I watched the fucking episode where Glenn gets his head bashed in. Have you seen that?
No.
I was actually in shock afterwards, I think. Like, I was disturbed. I remember being like going on my phone just trying to think about anything else because it was acted so well. The special effects were done so well. You basically watched a guy that you loved. He was one of the lovable characters, right? And he had a kid on the way and all this shit. You watch him get his fucking head beat in with a bat, and the first hit doesn't even kill him, but makes him basically like,
What's the name of that guy that
like
killed him? It was
that Negan guy with the spike. So it's a
Negan,
spiked bat going into his head, but he could still kind of talk, and he's like, Maggie, I love you, or whatever. But like, oh my God, it was, after that, I was like, I don't want to watch this anymore.
I had stopped watching not too long before that. I think the end of the previous season was where I got to, because I remember they were introducing that. They had some skirmishes with some of his people near the end of the season or something. Yeah, I did.
Well, in the same episode with Glenn, it's like you think that's not enough. Either later that episode or the next episode. Again, spoilers. They're like, this guy's threatening to chop off Carl's arm, and Rick's like there. So then I'm like feeling as a father, like, oh my God, imagine if someone's gonna. And the kid's saying like, no, Dad, let him do it because there was like a larger war at play, and he was trying to do it to make Rick submissive, basically. You know, and the kid's so hardened by this fucked up life he's been living that he's like, no, Dad, I'll survive. And he loses an eye at some point. Like, I don't know. It just got so fucking bleak. Like, the whole thing was...
So I think the thing with all these series, it's a really tough thing for the showrunners, but series need to be like maybe... the Brits do it good.
Yeah.
They have like maybe 3 seasons top, and it's usually
It's
over.
called writing the whole story before you fucking...
That's right. Because what is these guys get? They get excited. They start making the money, and it gets hot, and it's like...
And who's the most guilty?
Keep it
Lost.
Going, keep it going. Yo, Lost, yeah.
We were balls deep in that show. We loved that show.
Such a disappointment, yeah.
I remember feeling it too when it got to like the last 4 episodes, and we're starting to count down like the last episodes of this series, and I was like, there's no fucking way they're gonna answer all the questions I still have. And as each episode went off, I was like, nope, they still didn't answer this thing. And then by the end, it was like basically purgatory, which they had told us at the very beginning it wasn't. Yeah. It just felt like a giant fuck you to the viewers, you know? It's like, thanks for paying our bills for the last 6 years, but and they just light it on fire, you know? Yeah. The smoke monster, what the fuck was that? Yeah. No one ever explained it. Anyways.
The polar bear.
So we're going to wrap it up with the same way that we have done every time this season. I already told Kelly, I think when we officially start a new season, I'm going to switch up the end question. But we're going to do it for now. So,
oh my God.
If you could have any superpower.
I just realized.
Well, yeah, I was going to say, you should have had this one ready to go. You've watched a million people answer this question. Some people don't make it this far in our podcast, so I'm not sure if people realize how tradition this is, but we always ask the guests, if you could have any superpower, what would it be and why?
So...
I'm sweating now. Jesus.
I think...
Did we shut off the AC? Yeah.
I think I would go with...
No? Shit.
The power to heal. I think that's... I know, like, a superpower goes not a super sexy one, like flying or invulnerability.
I was going to say it almost seems just, like, outwardly altruistic. Just like, you know what I would do? I'd fix the world.
Yeah, well, but you know, could you just imagine if you have somebody who's horribly ill?
That's true.
And being able to touch them or lay hands on them or whatever, and they get miraculously better? Holy shit.
Yeah. But then that's so abusable because then does no one die anymore? Everyone's going to come to you like, fix me too.
Or they chain you
I just need another year with my daughter. And then you're this guy who's like...
Shape-shifting would be cool, too.
That was the one I always went with. Yeah. See,
Chameleon
this is what I...
Boy, the Legion of Superheroes. He was cool.
Changeling, yeah. Or Beast Boy?
No, Chameleon Lad.
Oh, or Chameleon, I thought his name just was.
Well, they changed.
They changed over the time, yeah.
Chameleon Boy, Chameleon Lad, you know.
I feel like now this is the perfect this really does show that we got to change the question, though, because I'm starting to find when I ask this question, we're getting a lot of the same answers coming up. There's only so many, right? You know, unless you're super, super imaginative. But anyways, it's a good time to wrap it up. Kelly has to work in the morning. I'm sweating for some reason. I don't know why. I got super hot all of a sudden. Yeah. So thank you. I love you. Thank you for being a good dad and helping with all this shit, obviously. And
onwards and upwards.
yeah. Well, who knows when the next episode's going to be, but we'll let you know. So, and we got a high five. And
High five it.
all right. Thank you.
Okay.
God, yeah, I'm dying of heat right now.